On the bottom side, Force's teammate, Tony Pedregons, will match up with Richard Hartman. Mark Oswald, Gary Clapshaw. Hoffman will match up with Mark Sievers, and Wyatt Rackey will go after Dale Worship. Now, as we told you, things are good and they're bad at Force's crew and his team. Let's check with Bob Fry now over there.
Ref, I don't know if anything ever is really bad over in the Castrol GTX pit area. Austin, I got to ask you a question. Rumor filtered back to me that after your qualifying run yesterday, a mid-5 you were quoted as saying that was an act of cowardice. Is that true?
That's true, Bob. We were plagued with a few problems. We ended up having to run when maybe the track was a little damp the day before, and we had to be absolutely certain we could go down the racetrack or we wouldn't be in the race today.
You don't like doing that, do you?
No, I don't. We had to make some changes that make it very hard on the car, but absolutely certain it'll go down there good enough to qualify, and that's what we did. Certainly what we'd like to do is be shooting for that bud check.
How busy can you be today if these cars both go a couple of rounds?
Oh, we can stay pretty busy, but, you know, we've got enough people, enough help, enough parts. We should be okay.
Austin Coyle has done this for a while, of course. He was crew chief with Frank Hawley when Hawley won right here. You love this racetrack.
Well, this racetrack's been good to me over the years, and certainly I hope it's going to be good to us today.
So the game plan here for the Castrol GTX guys today is try to beat one Pedregon and try to have the other Pedregon do real well or something like that. Anyway, Austin Coyle's going to be a busy guy here. They qualified on their last shot, almost did not make the field, and an act of cowardice put them into the program. Congratulations to Austin Coyle, John Force, and Tony Pedregons. Steve?
I thought it was an act of brilliance, actually. They got Force in the field. You know, every week...
We showed you that from Saturday night. Let's go down now to Steve Evans, who's with one of our funny car finals.
Well, John Force is setting sail for a 6th national championship, Winston Championship, and he's getting a great start. Let's look at round number 1 up against Chuck Edgels, his old kissin' buddy, in the Kendall car. Edgels is always tough, especially against Force. John qualified number 5, Edgels number 12. Off the starting line first was brute Force. Edgels weak. Force wins it 5-12, 296.24. That was one of his best runs so far of the event. Now, in the second round of funny car competition, John Force up against Whit Bazemore. Bazemore now under Smokin' Joe's colors. When you got that kind of a budget, you can be dangerous. Force knew it and took no chances against Bazemore, stepping it up to a 5.11 at 297 miles an hour. Joining me right now is John Force. And John, let's talk about the semifinal race against Cruz Pedregons. For the fans, it was a final in a lot of ways.
Well, it was a good way for us to start our year. But it was, I think, kind of unique because, as you know, Tony Pedregons, Cruz's brother, has been racing with us. And he said he was behind our car praying that we could win. Brotherly love, but team loyalty. And I'm just glad to have him on board.
Good luck in the final round. Have a safe ride more than anything else.
We're just having a lot of fun here with Castrol, Matt Toole, and that's Pontiac.
Bob Fry's having a lot of fun, too. He's in the pit of the other funny car finalists.
Hello to California as we get set now for the final run of the weekend. The funny car final, and boy, could you get it any better than this. John Force, the reigning champ, against his arch nemesis and rival, Al Hoffman, Bob.
I have been so highly successful in picking those finals. If you remember correctly, I had Billy Huff, and then, of course, I had Connie Coletta. You know what? Even though they have not had a chance to start that race car, I like Al Hoffman. Very strong runner, determined. I mean, you can see it in the look in his face. Tommy Anderson's a guy that is a very creative engine builder and engine tuner, and I think despite the fact that they did not get an opportunity to turn that over in the pit area, they're going to give Force the run for his life. Steve?
Well, I'm going to pick a winner, whichever driver can run low elapsed time of the day, because I think it's going to take a 5-0 to win this final round. Will it be Force? Will it be Hoffman? I'm not going to say, but they'll have to run an O, in my opinion. The racetrack is ready for that kind of power.
Well, you know, Steve, I got to agree with you on that, and I would say that I don't think turning the motor over or not having the opportunity to do so is a hindrance for Al Hoffman. I think Tommy Anderson has got the car ready. I do think, even though that's the case, I think Force is ready. I think Austin Coyle and Bernie Federley and now John Medlin all over there together. That's a brain trust that's going to wire this thing up, and Force is going to post that big number, Bob.
All I can do is think back to Phoenix last year, guys. Remember, Force wasn't qualified till the last round. Then he went out and struggled in the early rounds, and then he proceeded to put out Cruz Pedregons and Chuck Etchels and Al Hoffman. That could be the same scenario here. He was not quick during qualifying. Al Hoffman's the guy that's thrown off the really big numbers, but Force has done exactly what he's had to do to get here to the final round. Now, if Hoffman wants to be the heir apparent to the Winston title, he's the one that's got to stop John Force because nobody else has been able to do it.
These two gentlemen really don't like each other. It's not hype. It's not WWF. They're totally different personalities. They just clash on and off the racetrack. The same can be said for the crew chiefs, really. They respect each other. They don't really like each other all that much.
There you see Austin Coyle making the final adjustments on John Force's Firebird. The crew leading in, Tommy Anderson getting set. He'll do the same thing to Al Hoffman. And you go inside with them. Oh boy, are they pumped? The 1996 NHRA Winston Drag Racing Tour is off and running, and we are set now for the final pair of the Chief Winter Nationals. We hope you've enjoyed everything we brought for you. Here we go. Hoffman did exactly what he had to do. He picks up the win, and guess what? He did it with an O, a 5:05, 302 miles an hour. That does constitute big numbers. Force had to shut it off. He was off to a pretty good run, a tremendous reaction time of 4:01, and Hoffman is out through the escape hatch. Let's take a look at the replay. Boy, Force came loaded right off with a tremendous reaction time, almost a perfect light, and Hoffman was pedaling hard with a 496 reaction. Then something went wrong in Force's Castrol machine, and the Western Auto Parts America car goes on to victory as the flames go out for John Force. So how cold are things where you are? You want to heat them up? Go in car with Al Hoffman. That's what victory of the Winter Nationals looks like.
Celebration.
Who could that be? None other than John Force. Nobody does a burnout as long as Force today. Since Casey Spurlock is not in competition at this point, by default, I guess, you would say that Force is back to being the king of the burnouts. The crowd just loves it. His opponent here in the In-N-Out Burger car is Mark Oswald, with Bill Schultz, his crew chief. Oswald, a former Winston champion back in the mid-'80s, is a force to contend with indeed. He qualified in the number 9 spot at a 5:23, while John was the number 1 qualifier with a 5:04. The lane choice here by a little more than a 1/10 of a second goes to Force. He'll use the decision of his crew chief, Austin Coyle. That's him out in front of the car as to where to stage to get the best traction. It was rather ironic. The opponent that fell to Mark Oswald in round number 1 was Dale Boldy, who drove the In-N-Out Burger car to the championship here in Phoenix in 1990. Force just incredible. 5:10 at 258 miles an hour. Slowing at the far end of the track. Oswald trailing with a 5:21 at 287. Watch this one again. It was a pretty good race up till about the 8th mile mark, and then Force just drove away from Oswald. There you see Oswald just about a car length behind at the 8th mile, and from that point on, it was all over. Saw how quick Force shut her down. Still had a big lead.
John, only 258 miles an hour.
You won't believe it. See, this old GTX, old heap here quit right down there. And, man, I thought, oh, man, we're out of time here. And here come Oswald in that burst, man. Just smoked it right in there. I told Coyle, did we get him? I didn't really know.
Can you believe it ran a 5:10 at that speed?
She's trying to truck, but got to get back to start line. My boys up there.
Number 2 car.
Could you get me down there?
I can't take it all the way down there.
Get me close. I want to watch it.
Oh, look at that. John getting special service, taking him back to the starting line to watch this car. No, you're not seeing double, and John's not inside of it. That is Tony Pedregons driving the number 2 car of the Castrol Pontiac team. He qualified 5th at a 5:17, beat James Cousa in the first round. Number 13 qualifier with a 5:31, Kenji Okazaki in Jim Dunn's Moon Eyes car. And he got the break when the Cruz Pedregon red light occurred in the first round. Now he's got another Pedregon, Cruz's brother Tony, at the wheel of the John Force car. This car ran 4.99 on this racetrack in preseason testing. Talking about Tony Pedregon. Another trouble-plagued run for Jim Dunn, the Moon Eyes, and Kenji Okazaki. 6 seconds flat. Well, a year from now, they'll look at the chart and they'll just see the W beside it, and that win puts him into the Final 4 against the other Castrol car, John Force.
Can take the measure at Kenji.
Let's hope not.
Well, we know how Etchels feels about it. The question is, what about Jim Dunn and Kenji Okazaki? Steve asked the question.
Kenji, you know, Big Jim will do anything to beat John Force. Anything.
You got it. We're going to try hard. I mean, we're going to fix the problem. Probably it's going to be a good race.
Make sure you got that fire suit zipped up, if you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah, I know that.
Kenji's ridden out a few fires in his career. One thing about Okazaki, and this has got to prey on the mind of John Force, he is, on average, the best reaction time driver in funny car competition. By that I mean he reacts to the green light on the Christmas tree better than anybody else. Better than John Force, better than Chuck Etchels, you just name it. Kenji is at the top of the reaction time list. Kenji having engine problems again. John Force, no difficulties, a 5:14 at 2:93. And Kenji beat John Force off the starting line by nearly 2/100ths of a second. But all that advantage instantly disappeared for the Moon Eyes Dodge as the Pontiac of John Force pulled ahead. Watch Okazaki's car. A quick flash of flame and a blower explosion cost him a shot at Force, who moves into the finals to race Chuck Etchels. John will hold the choice of lane. Will lead in the Winston Chase, 100.5 rounds of racing over Chuck Harris. Martino is third. Franks and Huff tied for 4th and 5th. The finals in funny car. John Force, who has been the class car of elimination. Not running the O's, but consistently down in the 5 teams. Earlier, Steve looked at a problem part.
What is the littlest thing you could break that would cost you a race? John Force is finding out the hard way. At Pomona, final round against Al Hoffman, he broke this little bitty valve keeper, had to shut it off. It allows the valve to come out of this retainer and bad things happen. Here at Phoenix, they broke one Friday, warming the car up. They broke another one in Saturday qualifying, ruined that run, and they're just scared to death that somewhere down the track before this day is over, this little bitty dollar part is going to cost them a bundle.
One person who doesn't necessarily want to see Force have problems but wouldn't turn it down is the driver of the Kendall GT1 Dodge, Chuck Etchels. Etchels teaming up this season with Jim Epler, who brought over the Rug Doctor sponsorship to help in Etchels' racing efforts. One magnificent driving job by John Force. Did you see the car start to smoke the tires? He lifted off the throttle and regained traction, and he got back in it and still ran 5:19 at 295 miles an hour. Just a good indicator of how much power these machines can produce. If you can go out and lift completely out of the throttle, like he did right there when the flames went out, and then get back onto the Goodyear tires hook, and you see on the other side a bit of tire smoke coming off for Etchels. For Force, a dramatic win at a 5:19.
Yes, naysayers, there is a traction control device on this Pontiac. It's called John Force, and it's legal.
Hey, this old truck driver, I was starting to think I was pretty old. I ain't won a race, 5 championships, but I ain't won a race in a long time. Castrol and all the boys, Pontiac, Mac 2, I think they're starting to get a little bit worried, but the old Goodyear, she smoked them. I got back on it. She hiked the front end truck. What happened to Etchels?
Doesn't matter. You won it with a 19.
Well, let me tell you, we've needed this, and there's a lot of people like Action supporting us. Fram on Light, we're happy. We love y'all. finally won us a drag race. Seems like it's been 5 years.
Hasn't been that long, just since Brainerd last season, but Force is in the lead in the points chase, followed by Hoffman. Etchels and Bazemore are tied with
Roadster. Chuck Etchels, his buzz as you go on board with him is a 306-mile-an-hour pass that you get to make with him. Now, let's take a look at the funny car finalists. John Force, everybody expected maybe he's going to be there the way his season has been going. You can see how he got there, but what do you mean, Al Hoffman? No, he would not. Instead, he'd come up against Chuck Etchels. The question now becomes, can Chuck Etchels defeat John Force? What do you think, Bob Fry, with the Pro Stock Buzz? The Gainesville track records, and now look at the 1996 Gator National records to kind of put it all into perspective. You can see the Gainesville record is right there with Al Hoffman's mark, and Steve is standing by with John Force.
Well, first of all, before we talk to John, I'm going to tell all of you how John got to be a finalist here at the Mac Tools Gator Nationals. It all started in round number 1 up against Japanese national Kenji Okazaki. Okazaki right off the starting line. Blows a motor, slides around in tonal oil, almost tags the wall. John doesn't care what's happening in the other lane. He thunders to a 5:07 at 301.81 miles an hour. In round number 2, John Boy from Yorba Linda, California, squared off against another Californian, Mark Oswald, in the In-N-Out Burger car. This particular race saw both drivers with identical elapsed times, neither particularly good, but Force just drops the Burger car with a 5:12, 95-mile-an-hour blast to Oswald's 5:22 at 278. And along came the final 4, the semifinal. John joins me. You love to beat those Burger cars, and here you had another one. Here's Pedregons.
Well, it's all about winning points, and he's a heck of a racer, and we went after him. The car ran good.
How are you going to handle the final?
Well, we know that Timmy Richards knows how to make his hot rod run, and Etchels a good driver, but mainly just going to get real aggressive. The conditions are going to be excellent. Going to clean up this track, maybe this little bit of shower out here, and give the fans what they paid to see, a real drag race.
Now, John beat Pedregon with a 5:08 and lost lane choice to Chuck Etchels, as Bob Fry well knows.
Steve, Chuck's
John
probably...
Force funny car when we come back to Gainesville. The Mac Tool Gator Nationals are coming to you live from Gainesville, Florida. We have live final round coverage. And now we're going to throw in a little bit of nitro to warm you up wherever you are across our country tonight. John Force and Chuck Etchels. The fans waited all day to see some racing, and Force is getting their money's worth of the burnout. Bob, now we're going to throw some 5,500 horsepower at this racetrack. How do you think that's going to affect things?
The track's in great condition, there's no doubt. We have seen the Pro Stock bikes handle it. We saw the alcohol cars handle it. And I just talked with the guys from the Castrol car and John Force, and I said, how's the track look? And they said, well, it looks good to us. It's just going to be whichever team guessed right on the tune-up for down track. The air is a lot different than it was earlier in the day. This should be a good matchup. Chuck Etchels needs this race. The Kendall car has lost twice in the first 2 races this year to John Force. He's been the quicker car in 2 of the rounds. He needs to get this race and get himself back in the points chase.
Steve, I got to believe if this comes to a battle of pedaling the race car, John Force is going to have the advantage. Don't you agree?
Well, I'd love to agree with you, Ralph, but I can't. Etchels has been a warrior for a long, long time, but Chuck is mainly concerned with his reaction times. It's a new car. The seat doesn't fit him very well. He's having to make the step of the throttle with his ankle instead of his hip and leg. And Frank Hulley has proven at his school here that that hip-leg movement is much quicker. So Etchels is concerned about Force getting away first on him.
Chuck Etchels is driving a Victory chassis here in Funny Car. It is the only Victory-built Funny Car chassis. Force, of course, was the first guy to run 300 miles an hour here in Gainesville, and he's the 95 Gator Nationals champion. Chuck Etchels, as you see Tim Richards line him up into the lights. Etchels lost here in 95 in the second round to who else? John Force. Pedal, but Force is the winner. A 499 at 301 miles an hour to a losing 523. Bigger speed for Etchels, 302 miles per hour. So there was some pedaling involved, but not the way we thought we might. Watch this launch. Both drivers were a little bit slow on the reaction times, both of them in the 5s, but all the candles were lit for force. The traction was there. Austin Coyle, Bernie Federley, and the crew did the best job in setting the car up. A 499 at 301, and you got a new winner in John Force.
Forrest is already talking. Let's listen.
I lost the steering wheel. Couldn't find it. It picked up the front end. Boy, I don't know what old man Austin did, but he did something. But that ought to keep Pontiac and the boys happy out there. Mac Tool, we told you we could run collectible toys. All you guys, what the hell? Get in here, Mac Tool. Let's do this big time.
Tim McDonald, the new president of Mac Tools, has the trophy for John Forrest. He's one of his associate sponsors. John, $499. Both of you ran 300.
It was a hot rod. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I hit the throttle for the first time in years. I was scared. I came off the steering wheel. I thought, what's that going on? Come on down. I grabbed it. It hooked up. It trucked. Boy, had fire 10 feet up. That's what you pay me for, boss.
Right. If he ever comes out of his shell, Ralph, he's going to be something.
Force scared? I don't think so. John Force, one thing he does have is a tight grip, maybe not on the steering wheel, but the top of the Winston Funny Car point standings, and Al Hoffman slipping backwards. Chuck Etchels takes over second, Cruz and Whit Bazemore rounded off. Hey, we got one more final round of action for you. It comes from
There was no winner's bow for Kenji after round 2 as Force easily defeated the Japanese driver. And it'll be a team semifinal as Tony Pedregon also advanced. On the other side of the ladder, the only surprise in round 1, Mark Oswald's upset of Chuck Etchels, which moved him into a second round clash with Al Hoffman, who won this race in both 19. Continued pursuit for even the slightest edge. We're ready now for the semifinals in Funny Car. Teammates John Force going against Tony Pedregon.
This is Pedregon. The car is virtually identical except for the numbers on the side, and there is John Force carrying the world champion #1. And what a burnout. And this has really got the fans excited.
Tremendous run that took him halfway down the track, and that's ignited the crowd. John Force with better than a 100-point advantage after just 3 events this year over Chuck Etchels, looking to extend his domination of 1996.
That is John Medlin, crew chief for Tony Pedregon. Tony qualified number 12 at a 5:23, ran a 5:21 to beat Richard Hartman in round 1 and took out Gary Densham in round number 2. John Force, well, he defeated Ronnie Young in round 1 and Kenji Okazaki, as we told you earlier, in round number 2. Will we see a race here, or will Tony go in the tank for the boss?
Johnny, you spent a ton of money to field a second car, and now you race it. Wouldn't it be foolish to give him a chance to beat you?
I don't know. Fans want to see a drag race, and I want to see how good he is, so we'll see. Yeah. Hired my own assassin.
And how does Tony see things here?
It was going to happen sooner or later. You and the boss. What do you think? What about it?
Well, you know, I'm real excited about racing them, and I know it's going to be a tough race, but we're gonna duke it out. And there is strategy involved, but you know, the better car is going to win, and it's kind of nice to know that a Castrol car is going to be in the final round.
Good politician.
And to quote John Forrest, I didn't hire this kid to teach him how to lose. But lose he may if he doesn't hurry up. Forrest has problems. Pedregon loses, but at 300 miles an hour, 5.15 seconds. To the boss's 5.02 at a slowing 270.
Let's go to Steve with Team Force.
I tell you, when that thing started to sputter, his 300 darn near nailed you.
You ran 300? Who's 300?
Yes.
It ran 300.
I was running after you.
Back to you, Gary.
I think Force a little bit surprised at the power from young Tony Pedregon. And speaking of surprises, this could be one right here as Del lies still far and away the leader with Franks in the number 2 position, Edwards now in the number 4 spot.
Our Funny Car finalists are lit and getting ready. John Force and Al Hoffman. Don't be surprised if the bodies go up and down. That's pretty normal in their routines. Al Hoffman was brimming with confidence after he won the opening race of the year in Pomona, California. He said, tell Force to expect more of the same. Well, John counterpunched. He won the Phoenix race. He won in Gainesville. He now has a strong points lead. I asked John, I said, is Al Hoffman any different towards you?
He's really acting strange lately, like he's being a real nice guy, Steve. He's starting to worry me.
Really?
Yeah, he's being nice. Come down, told me how good I was driving and my car was running good. And that ain't
trick.
That ain't Al. He's up to something.
A puzzled John Force trying to figure out what his rivals got up his sleeve.
Hoffman fighting for control to no avail. John Force's driving was spot on. 4.7 reaction time, a 5.05 elapsed time, a speed of 294. He has won the Slick 50 Nationals.
Once again, John Force and his juggernaut team roll on. A 4-time winner now at Houston as he makes the move, had the initial jump in reaction time, and then, of course, you saw Hoffman getting sideways, and the race was over. Career win number 51 for Force. He's with Steve.
John, this has been a wild day at the races.
I'm a 46-year-old truck driver still trying to prove myself. Got my kid trying to outrun me, or my driver, and Hoffman parked on me on the start line. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know if he had a problem or what. He wouldn't come in. I was setting that old clutch he was dragging, but what can I say to the folks that pay me? We're pretty bad, guys.
Oh, yes, indeed. John Force stretches the lead over Hoffman now. Etchells, Pedregon, Worsham far behind. So Force has 3 victories to Hoffman's 1 thus far this season, and these rivals are certain to meet many more times before the campaign is over. Top Fuel.
Also in round number 1 action, the other half of the Racing Pedregon brothers at the Rock this weekend. This is Tony and the John Force Team Castrol car. He wasn't as fortunate as Cruz. He went up in smoke, losing to Del Worsham. Tony's boss man, John Force, at the wheel of the other Castrol car, had the best elapsed time of 5:14. His opponent, Tom Hoover, lost traction. The funny car's really having problems spinning the tires. Maybe Steve has an explanation. Now, the Worsham and Fink team, Del qualified very well, actually in the number 5 spot with one of those teams of 5:14 at 289. He did not qualify a year ago. John Force easily outdistanced the field. He had a 5:05 and speed of 301 miles an hour. He is the defending Winston Select Invitational champ. John Force was vulnerable. You saw the problems with the engine. He dropped a cylinder. It failed to fire. Del Worsham at one point had actually pulled ahead of the Castrol machine, but he lost traction. Here's where the replays come in so handy. Look at this. The advantage off the starting line was all Worsham, but John Force dropped the cylinder. Look at the raw fuel coming out. Watch the injectors on Del Worsham's car. Look at that. He flashed them on and off. That was when he got off the throttle. That's what cost him the win as John Force went ahead into the final round. Oh, what a rivalry this is. Force and Hoffman.
That young man just about sent you packing, friend.
Well, I was doing all I could do, trying to pedal with my feet. It was close. Dropped a hole in the left start line, just wouldn't run, and kept motoring. I hate to drive it like that because it's trying to kill itself, you know, and kept chasing him and chasing him. And I seen the cones coming up. I think, well, it's over. No final round here, and all of a sudden the kid just dropped off, and we nicked him right in the lights.
He even left on you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it just shows you I'm getting old. What can I say?
The Pro Stock Final Four coming up next from the Rock. See, look at the shock on Warren Johnson's face. That doesn't happen all that often. Certainly he is proud of that win. Here is John Force. If there is a hot rivalry in funny car today, it is between Force and his opponent, Al Hoffman. That's Austin Coyle bending in under the body on the Force car. Tom Anderson is the crew chief for Al Hoffman. He's the one that holds up the body, checks things out, gives the thumbs up sign as Al's wife, Helen, directs him into the spot on the racetrack. But Austin Coyle, along with Bernie Federley, have been working for years for John Force, and it has definitely paid off. He is a 5-time Winston champion. Using up the barge in the pilot chute, pops off the back of the parachute. That's what's laying out on the racetrack. So Force was able to take the win and still save the race car. Lots of strange flames coming out at about the 1,000-foot mark. Look at the lead. Hoffman was behind at the starting line and never could catch up. Great race elapsed time-wise. Force had the win at a 5:15 at only 277 miles an hour. Hoffman was charging hard at the end, 5:18 at 292 miles an hour.
Hey, you won it by 0.03 of a second. It looks like you both burned it up to do it.
She was wounded down there, but good race, good money. You know, doing them back-to-back here with Lloyd T, but you know what can I say? Castrol gives me the budget, Pontiac, Mac Tool, all these guys, and Action Collectibles, but real bottom line, I got a great team. They know how to adapt. I'm off my game today, Steve. I need Roy Hale to teach me, but I'm excited to be here in the deal. Always excited to race Al Hoffman. He's a great guy, and I had God on my side today, and I don't know why he helps me, but my old heap should have been out against Horsham, and I just lucked through there. So we'll take a win.
And a fine win it is, and about $40,000.
And to find interview.
Pacific Coast. Right now, let's have a look at some funny car highlights. A few surprises here as well. How about the rookie, Tim Wilkerson, out of the alcohol ranks with Ron Swearingen tuning the car. Could he get in this very tough field? Watch this young man go. He learns quick. 526, 286 miles an hour. Grabbed him the number 65. Now, Chris Pedregons, the McDonald's Pontiac, who's been having a lot of problems, not here. 5.07, 303 miles an hour. And that was a big relief to John Force, because as you're about to see, Force still on his rampage since February. Look at this baby roar. Track record, 5:02, 297 miles an hour. Forsey, I think you really wanted to run 300 to match wheels with Cruz Pedregons.
Well, we really wanted to do it for the fans, but it's fun the tires on the 502, Steve. I had to shut it off, and that was just low, so we'll take it.
You don't have any idea what to expect in this racetrack this morning?
No, it's really tricky. When you look at the stats, 502's low, and 11 seconds put you in the 16th spot. I'm real nervous about this today.
And you got two cars in the field.
Yeah, we do. So if one of us don't make it, someone's going to back me up.
Have a safe day.
It's going to be great. I think the weather's turning nice. It's going to be a great race for Fram, so anybody can win, though.
The one and only John Force to the one and only Bob Fry.
Fink and Worsham Texas stagecoach entry had Force covered to the 1,000-foot mark. Then problems set in for Dell, and a lucky Force moved into the final to meet Al Hoffman.
We come here to have a good time. It's a good race. You know, we really enjoy this race. Winston kind of puts it on, and you know, it's a thank you to them and all they've done for the sport, and you know, we really enjoy coming to this.
Hoffman's idea of fun turned serious at the green, and both drivers chewed up parts and pieces. Again, luck played into Force's hand, taking a close win.
It's just fun to win and just keep on winning. Anytime you race a guy like Al Hoffman, Western Auto, it's exciting. We did our game. We were really off today. I'm mainly off myself. I was off. I need the good Lord in my lanes. He got me around Worsham. I don't know how, but he did.
Force makes this his second win in a row at the Rock. Etchels, Hoffman, and Oswald have also taken home the big bucks. As in the other two.
An interested observer of this first round of Top Fuel is John Force. John, it's been ugly.
Well, you know, Tommy Johnson in the Fram car there, I mean, he wasn't supposed to be in the race, but Perdone's deal was a little upside down over there. I don't know what's going on. I think the track's pretty tricky here.
You are really on a roll here at the start of this season. In your wildest dreams, did you expect this kind of start?
No, but boy, when you get to a racetrack like this, I mean, it's a great racetrack here at Atlanta, but it's just tricky because of the weather contract. The track's falling up over there in that lane, so we're just watching it real close.
Well, let's wish you a lot of luck here today, going for his fourth big championship of the season. Let's get into the far end of the racetrack now, and Steve Evans.
The GTX car is going to win. Really going out on an edge here, aren't I? Tony Pedregons is one of our finalists. You can see that Tony has really done a great job here today, making his way into the finals. And guess who he's going to go up against? You betcha, John Force. The guy who has pretty much owned the funny car division so far this year has got to go up against his teammate, Steve.
He will indeed, but first let us show you how he got to that point. He used the top half of the field like a doormat. In round number one, it was Brad Platt, and I think crew chief Boston Toil said this kid is not going to be a contender, and did not soup up the Foes car where it might smoke the tires. Watch how smoothly John goes down the racetrack. A 519 at 298 miles an hour. Good top speed for that elapsed time. In the second round, it was John Force up against his old pal Chuck Etchels. Chuck enjoys beating John whenever he can. Would it happen on this day? Odds knew Etchels would be tougher and tuned Force up to a 509 at 300 miles an hour. And John Force, your next opponent was Mark Oswald. How did you feel about that race?
Well, you always have to go after him and Bill Schultz because they can run a number. They weren't consistent. We shot our deal. Wasn't as good as we wanted, but not good enough to get lane choice over my other car, but we're in the final.
You never know about Oswald. Bill Schultz is capable, as you say, of about anything.
And Oswald's a good driver on the starting line. And it's a light race car that they always go with. And he's a small guy. He's light. He's probably 50 pounds under me, but we pulled it out.
You have lost lane choice to an employee with that crummy 513 against Oswald. How do you feel about that?
He's fired right today.
You'd like to change cars, I think.
Yeah, well, they won't let me. We thought about it, but Tony's doing a great job, John Medlin and these guys. So we're excited. We're going to race for it. Whatever in the heck, we're both in the final.
Good luck to both of you, okay?
No matter, yeah?
You know, a little girly throw will get me over to Bob Fry. He's right next door.
Yeah, we are just like half a pit over, and we're going to take a look at how Tony Pedregons got to the final. The former employee of John Force, by the way. In round number 1, Tony over on the far side of the race course would take on Dean Scusa. Scusa had formerly gone to the championship round here and lost, ironically enough, to John Force. Now, this would be a pretty good pass for Tony. He would put down a 5:11, and again, he continues to run those big speeds on the top end of the racetrack. Nice run for Tony and got him solidly into round number 2. In the second round, he would continue to be on the far side of the race course. He would take on Gary Denson, the guy we mentioned just a little while ago, and this one would be a very strong, very impressive run. 298 miles per hour for Tony right here, and he actually won this one driving away. That race was not close. That would set up the semifinal matchup. He would go against Whit Bazemore, the guy that would be king. And as we get set to go into that semifinal matchup, Bazemore on the near side, and again, Tony draws the far side of the racetrack. This would be an overmatch right from the beginning. Smoking the tires for Whit Bazemore. He was out of it. And watch this. Right down Broadway goes Tony Pedregons at a 5:05, and that got him lane choice, and then got him fired. That's what the boss said. He told me, "You're fired." I can't hear what you're saying, but we're just trying to run our own race out here, and we'll come back and finish up the show. Let's go back to the round.
Thanks, Bob. Tony Pedregons, of course, having a pretty good day, and you can bet that him and John Force are going to throw absolutely everything at each other. This one is for pride and inside team morale. Let's take a look.
The Johnson kid, John Force, and his protege, who actually hasn't been fired, but he might be after he beats John Force. Think it's going to happen? Stay around. It's coming up live.
Nothing like a nitro burning funny car, and these youngsters are about to get an education in extremely high horsepower. There is John Medlin doing the final touches to Tony Pedregons' car as they cinch down as tight as they can on those Simpson belts, because they got 6,000 horsepower about ready to take Tony down the track, and hopefully, Bob, beating his boss.
Yep, and I think that's exactly what's going to happen. This will be an all-out drag race to the finish line. John Force is so far out in front of the points, he could take a spring break and probably win his 6th championship here this year. Tony Pedregons is extremely confident. And I'll tell you what, there's a little bit of bragging rights up for grabs right here. The one camp certainly wants to beat the other camp. They ran earlier this season. Tony ran a 300-mile-an-hour run against him down in Houston and is certainly not afraid of the 5-time Winston champion.
A little bit of bragging rights? How about a whole bunch of bragging rights? These crews worked right next door to each other, Steve, and I got to believe nobody's going to let anybody forget this one for quite a while.
We had our spies in that camp, and I can tell you they did not soften up the clutch in Tony's car. They did not put a rag blower on it. They did not put a set of jump heads on it. It is exactly as it was in the semifinals when Tony got the lane choice. This is a battle between two guys that want to race desperately and have a lot of bragging rights when it's over.
Now, the one thing that will make this even bigger for Tony Pedregons is if he can win this, is that even though they're both sponsored by Castrol, don't forget R&D parts are on Tony's car, whereas more of the we know what will work parts are on Force's car. Tony's car sometimes will even run some of the used parts off of Force's car. So if he can do it, he's doing it with a lot less.
Good thing about the finals is the track is in great condition here. Meanwhile, here comes the champion. You gotta love it. The racetrack here, I just talked with both crew chiefs for the teams, and I've already spoken with the guys in Top Fuel. They really like the way the racetrack looks. It's in great shape. Could be a high 490 run here in the finals, boys.
I think that's very possible, Bob. And the other thing that's really interesting is Tony also told me that these two teams would share information all the way through into the finals. They were not afraid to say, well, okay, at this point, we're going to go use our black book, you go use yours. They wanted to get these cars set up as good as they could to put on the best show they could for the fans in the grandstands here at the Fram Nationals. And it's been kind of interesting to watch the performance of these cars. Force ran first in round number 1, and then he called back up, radio, let them know what they did to the car and how it performed. And Steve, they were able to make changes to Tony's car. We saw the first 300 run out of Tony's. The next round, John matched up with a 300-mile-an-hour run.
Well, Ralph, call me a dreamer, but I think there's a potential here for the first ever 4-second, 300-mile-an-hour side-by-side funny car duel.
I think I would jump on that bandwagon as well. This is going to be one of the best Nitro finals we've seen in a long time here on TNN. John Force, the big dog, going up against his own stablemate. The win light goes to Tony Pedregons with a 5-1, 294 miles an hour to a losing 5-3, 276 miles an hour. Now, take a look at the replay. We were talking a lot about all the other numbers. Well, reaction time was in the favor of Force. A 494 to a sleepy 511. But look at the problems with the flames on Force's car. The far end of the racetrack. Pedregons' car works all the way down the quarter mile. He picks up a healthy win, and is this guy happy? John Medlin just said, bragging rights are mine, so we have to do it again. And you can be sure the first person to come over and congratulate Tony Pedregons, of course, will be Evans, but you know Force won't be far behind, Steve.
Tony, a fabulous contest for the fans and everyone at home. He left on you a bit, but you had the power where it counted in the middle of the racetrack.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I got to give all the credit to my team. You know, I got to tell you, John's the genuine article. You know, he's a man of his word, and my guys really deserve all the credit. You know, they worked awful hard to get here, and, you know, for John to just let us go at it like this, you know, it just, you know, says a lot about him.
He's a special guy, John Force.
Tip of the hat to the Castrol guys and the quality of the show. And here's a look at the points. Force, he doesn't lose too much, but Tony Pedregons picks up a bunch, Bob.
The Top Fuel final should be
known as funny cars. Let's check in with Steve.
5-time funny car champion John Force is NHRA's rock star. After 20 years of hard work, the former truck driver has the big house on the hill in California. He's got a tour bus Hootie and the Blowfish would kill for. He's also acquired a bulldog of a rival and a guy named Al Hoffman. Al has now hired a personal trainer for on and off the racetrack. And Force said in print, if Al diets, I'll diet. If Al jogs, I'll jog. If Al gets an earring, I'll get an earring. Well, in round number 1, the rivalry continued earlier today. It was John Force, the #1 qualifier, 5-time funny car champion, up against Tom Hoover, the blue car, in the far lane. Hoover lost traction, was never really in it. Force advanced with an outstanding 5:04 and a huge speed of 297 miles an hour.
And what was a huge upset because Pedregons was coming off a victory in Atlanta. Let's go back and take a look at that matchup.
Pedregons in the John Force team car was in the near lane. Remember, Brad Platt had never won around. Tony got the jump. Tony lost traction, got close to the center line, and Brad Platt just stared and stared his way all the way down the quarter mile for his first ever win light in NHRA championship competition.
And certainly the biggest surprise of the competition. One question has been answered. He will have no Gary Bolger alongside. The Bolger crew worked so diligently to try to make repairs, but they couldn't get it done in time, so it's a single run now for John Force.
Force has been in the final round of every race. Only Al Hoffman has beaten him. That was the opening race of the year, and his teammate Tony Pedregons got him 2 weeks ago. All he has to do to win here is stage the car. But obviously that is not the Force way. Oh, John hammers it home to a 5:07 at 298 as if Hoffman was in the other lane.
Flirting with that 300-mile-per-hour mark. Another impressive round for John Force. And getting ready for our next pair and their burnouts, we're looking at Al Hoffman, the dreaded rival of Force. Hoffman goes against Del Worsham. The cockpit filled with smoke. That was on board with Hoffman, and here's a lengthy burnout by Worsham. Well, John Force is one who's never at a loss for words. Let's see what's coming up in this conversation with Steve Evans.
Where's your earring, Forrest?
No earring. Leave that to Al. But
507.
yeah, it's a good hot rod today. It's going out there and doing what Castrol wants it to do. It just moves around a little bit, just trucks right down, right in the eyes. Don't even stumble.
Along with Frank Hawley and Steve Evans, I'm Gary Gerald as we welcome you back to the Pennzoil Nationals south of Richmond, Virginia. You're looking at the dominant man in funny car in recent years, John Force, going against the underdog, Mark Oswald.
You know, we don't really have a good shot at beating him. We have real trouble getting down that left lane, especially on the other end of the racetrack. So what we're going to do is we're going to just take our best guess at making this car run real good and hope that he falters a little bit.
And he just might, because this track right now in the heat of the day is not as good as it was earlier. Austin Coyle knows that and hopes that he has made the right adjustments. Mark Oswald, first time in a long time the team from California has had the funding to run the entire tour. They do, and they're dangerous. Oswald loses traction. John Force did a magical driving job. It was almost imperceptible. We saw the header flame go down and come back. That means that Force pedaled that car. Watch this, Gary. The left-hand side of your screen, John Force. Got to watch very closely. Watch the header flame. Right there, John was in and out of it and didn't suffer the tire smoking fate that has now sidelined Mark Oswald.
And it is exactly that kind of skill, the subtle nuances that Force has accumulated over so many years that have carried him to more than 50 funny car wins and 5 NHRA championships.
So Force here, he needs to find something in the middle to counteract the brute force of John Force.
First time, Steve, for Pedregon to be in the finals this year. Force is the defending event champion, so he's trying to build momentum with a second consecutive triumph in Richmond.
And John Force has the memory of an elephant. He knows Cruz Pedregon was the only driver to take a title away from him in this decade. Back in '92 in his rookie season, Cruz won it all. Pedregon leaves with Force. Identical reaction times, but it's Force with the performance. 5:07 and 285, and he blew the supercharger sideways right at the finish line. That's where the speed of 285 comes from. It would have been over 300, I think, otherwise.
Steve mentioned virtually identical reaction times. Watch Force now on the left side of the screen as we go to the second angle. Watch the exhaust headers. You'll see the flame flicker. Does that indicate a problem? And then it detonates.
Now that was a ride. Big old explosion, big old fire. It's my birthday, and I blew up my stuff myself. How do we do, gang? I'm getting too old for this, Steve.
Never too old for this, John.
Happy birthday to me.
Happy birthday to you. Gary?
Happy 47th to John Force, who extends his lead after 6 of 19 events this season. And for Cruz Pedregon, his first appearance in the top 5 as he vaults past his brother Tony, and we look at the damage to John Force's machine. Our top fuel final is coming up next. Shelly Anderson.
Catch him, but it ain't happening, Al. Not now. Now let's take a look at who is in our finals here. Gary Densham. Great to see him here. He put away Okazaki, he put away Hoffman, and Cruz Pedregon. He has definitely earned his way into the finals here at Englishtown. On the other side, no surprise here, Force has made every final so far this year, so why not here at Englishtown? He did put away his teammate, though, didn't he, Steve?
Oh, absolutely. And let me tell you, the Nitro cars, unlike the Pro Stocks, have had no problems with this racetrack, even in the heat. Let's take John Force. In round number 1, he only qualified number 4. He was scheduled to race Jerry Caminito, the comeback kid from New Jersey. Caminito didn't have the parts or pieces to compete. He took the round money and hit the road. Force hit the racetrack. He could have taken it easy, not John style. 5:06, 302 miles an hour for openers. In round number 2, oh, this had upset written all over it. Del Worsham from California had run 5:07 and 5:08. Force had lane choice by 100, but John had the performance when he needed it. 5:05 to a 5:12. Force another huge speed, 304 miles an hour. The final 4, nope, your glasses are okay. Don't tune your TV, you're not seeing double. It was Tony Pedregons in the second Force car, the number 1 qualifier at 5:02. He had some tire shake, was forced to shut it off. And John moved into the final round with a 5:07. Again, 303 miles an hour. You're more nervous racing Tony than anybody else.
I really am. I mean, Tony's a tough competitor. He's a teammate, and he knows what we got over here, but we got around him. It's all about points here.
You know, it's the law of averages. Someday Gary Densham is going to beat your butt, and that might be today.
You know, I really give credit here in the heat to Austin Coyle, guy that tunes this car, and Bernie Federley and John Medlin. But, yeah, Densham, he's way overdue. We got to keep our eye on him.
Indeed. Ralph Shaheen, what's Gary think about all of this? Or Bob Fry, what's Gary think?
Motors coming to life. The Castrol GTX Firebird of John Force roars to life. 6,000 horsepower rumbling in the belly of that green, white, and red machine. These two met in the final round of the 95 Champion Auto Stores Nationals in Force 1. Here comes the burnout. That is how a burnout is done. Look how far down Force went. You can hear that Mopar Parts Nationals crowd roaring in the background, Bob.
Let me tell you, guys, in 1971 here, a guy named Jim Heinsberger beat Don Garlitz. That was a pretty big upset. In 86, Jerry Marconi, that's right, beat Eddie Hill. That was a pretty big upset. None will be bigger than if Gary Densham takes out John Force in the funny car final here in 1996.
What a statement it is that John Force here, we've completed 7 of the 19 events on the NHRA Winston Championship Trail. John Force has made it to the finals of all 7 events. Quite possibly the greatest behind the wheel of a funny car.
And I would also tell you, no matter who wins tonight, these two crews will share the fun of the weekend. They'll have dinner, a couple of cold ones. They have a lot of fun, maybe listen to some music. They're just great buddies. It won't matter personally who does what.
This is when Force and his crew are in their element. The hotter the weather gets, the slipperier the racetracks get, the better this car seems to run. You want a Winston Championship away from Force, you usually got to get a lot of points up on him early in the cooler times of the year, because this team does a tremendous amount of match racing all across the country. In fact, they visit this racetrack in July, although they do come here at night. Austin Coyle's got Force where he wants him. Here we go, Force and Densham. John Force just motored away a 5.0, 298 miles an hour. Puts away a slowing 5.28 for Gary Densham. Here's the replay of Force's 5.08. He got away quicker, 5.01 to a 5.13. Reaction times in the Nitro class is a little bit slower anyway, because it takes a while for the cars to react. Once he gets going, Federley and Coyle, and you know John Medlin helped out a little bit too, I'm sure. The brain trust put the Castrol car down to the far end and to another win. This is the only run Force has made all day, not over 300 miles an hour, but a win nonetheless, Steve.
John, I know you hated to do it, but poor old Densham, he just wasn't in this one.
I don't know what happened. We run a good number at all.
Yeah, first time it hasn't run 300 all day. What happened?
No, she knows. I thought it. Like I say, it's great to be live, and it's great to be alive, because she nosed over going in, and I still held my foot on it. I thought she might run a number, but, you know, she's a good old hot rod. Pontiac, she's made us proud, and Castrol and all the guys, we teamed up with 2 cars with Tony. It's really working, Steve.
A final 5.08, just what you wanted.
So you won't just hold out on that stuff, don't you? Make me wonder if I ran 5.20 or something. Good old hot rod. Just want to tell the fans out there, the ones that are home in front of that TV, we love you. If we don't see you, we're just saying hi to you right now, and we do love you. What it's all about.
And he means that. Absolutely.
Mac Tool, I love you too.
I'm sure they know that, John. John Force picks up more points. He leads them even farther now over Al Hoffman. It should give Force 776 points to Hoffman's 448. Cruz Pedregon sits back in third. Then Tony Pedregon and Chuck Etchels rounding out the top 5.
I want to tell you guys,
John Force is also flying, thanks in part to Austin Coyle's Witch's Brew in the tank. Last weekend, 497, 302, number 1. Not a big shocker, though. Conditions were almost perfect. This morning, round 1, it was terrible. Nobody could run better than 520. Force, 502, 304. Even he was stunned.
This is really aggravates me. Just the Pontiac, what can I say? She dances, she plays around. They told me I was really nervous. I said, pull her back. Don't put me up in smoke. Go, who's the whoop me? And it just motored right down through there. But an 0-2, it amazes me.
But there's 3 more tough rounds for John to go, and this is not his lucky racetrack. He has won 53 national events in his career, 48 of those in the 90s, but only 1 here at Columbus. He's ignoring me. Let me give you his history. In 93, he banged the blower. In 94, he banged his brain. Red light had left too soon. In 95, Al Hoffman used him like a doormat in the final round. John has got a lot ahead of him before this day is done.
But certainly, Steve, that job in the first round, so impressive. Etchells, Hoffman, Tony Pedregons have advanced on the top part of the ladder.
That was Whit Bazemore. When it happens that far down the quarter mile, lifting is losing.
Well, John Force is acknowledged as maybe the master of the back pedal. He's also been so dominant this year. He ran 304 miles per hour when he ousted Tom Hoover. He goes against Etchells, the number 8 qualifier. He beat Gary Densham in round number 1.
John Force and his crew are the Chicago Bulls of funny car racing, and right now Chuck Etchells would like to be Seattle on their home court. John Force has been a little complacent reaction time-wise. That could be advantage for Etchells if he's sharp. Etchells last to stage. Etchells leads first. Both of them try to smoke the tires forward. Almost hits the wall. A little fire in the engine compartment of Etchells' car, but crew chief Jim Richards is not concerned with that. They have beat the unstoppable. 5:56.250.
Let's take a look at the replay sequence. Etchells with the advantage in terms of reaction time. But both men begin to lose traction, and it becomes a pedaling contest. Keep in mind now, this is the first time this year that John Force will not be in the final rounds. In fact, only the 3rd time in 32 elimination runs this season that he ends up losing. On board now, real time with Chuck Etchells. A flash of flame, but no major problem. He advances.
Look at this. Love him. He beat us up, but we blew our stuff up in his fine fashion, taking after my hero.
Whoop me.
This is just a jinx track for you, that's all.
I couldn't get off the wall, but couldn't lose to a better guy.
Thanks, John.
High praise from John Force, who'll be watching closely now as a car owner, watching Tony Pedregons, his young driver in this machine, who'll be going up against Al Hoffman. Hoffman qualified in the 4th spot. He ousted Kenji Okazaki in the opening round. Hoffman is the defending champion in funny car here at Columbus, and he's always dangerous.
And he absolutely detests John Force and anything that has his name on it. Hopping close to the center line, almost tagged it. John Force says, yes, we are still alive.
Well, we got a team car, buddy.
That's why you got one. It is Tony Pedregons advancing at 5:32 to a 5:43.
Checking out now the semifinal pairings. In the final 4, Whit Bazemore with lane choice against Mark Oswald. The other matchup has Chuck Etchells going against Tony Pedregons. Steve?
But Tony, you had the boss jumping for joy down here. You guys are still alive. Austin Cole and the crew go by. They'll be there to lend a hand, too.
Yeah, that's right. You know, I hate to see the boss go out there and get beat, but, you know, that's another reason for this 2-car setup. And, you know, Hoffman's tough. He's a good guy, but he's a little down and out right now, but they'll be back. So as long as we get by the next round.
He's even more down and out now.
At the start line, our other semifinal pair, Tony Pedregons on the far lane going against Chuck Etchells on the near side. Pedregons, who won at Atlanta and in fact was the number 1 qualifier at the last event at Englishtown, may have his hands full against the veteran Etchells.
Etchells has a huge edge in experience. He comes from the same background as John Force. Match racing on bad racetracks. It teaches you how to pedal to get through the heat and humidity.
Etchells has been into 2 finals thus far this year, looking for a 3rd.
Tony gets the jump, but loses traction, much like John Force did. Chuck Etchells pedals that car. Maybe hurt the motor a tiny bit, but they've got a lot of parts. A 5:36 and 2:75 dances Etchells into the final.
And Steve, that 5:36 is good enough for lane choice in the finals for Etchells. He'll be challenged by...
As hot as it is, what is this man doing sitting out here watching the races in his fire suit?
I come down here to watch Tony, but I told you it's not hot in the fire suit. It's cooler inside than it is outside. Just like Kenji, he's on fire down there. He'll be hotter out of the car than he is in it, trust me.
Round number 2 found John Force in the near lane in the Castrol machine against Paul Smith in his drag racing school, Oldsmobile Cutlass. A closer race than Force wanted. A tenth of a second separated them, with John Force having a 5:22 winning time at 299 miles an hour. And as you saw in the run, John had to lift off the throttle at least once. A great run for that kind of driving, 5:22 at 299. Here's the replay. Take a look at Force in the near lane. Car started to move around on him. There he started to lose traction. And at that point, Paul Smith was well ahead of John Force. Probably made him just a little bit nervous, but by the time they reached the finish, more than a car length daylight.
John, old Paul Smith came after your lunch, buddy. At half track, I thought you were dead meat.
He really is. You know, he's a veteran, and he knows how to play the game. The hardest thing for me was not to break concentration, because at 400 feet, he had half a car on me. I still had to pedal it, do what it did, and then it trucked on down through there. So I don't know what happened, but he's a veteran. That's why we love the guy.
You're alive. The Team Force Castrol car was to have run Kenji Okazaki. Kenji unable to show due to the engine problems after that explosion. Tony Pedregons smoked the tires.
It had to happen sooner or later. Now it's the time to race your own brother in the Final Four.
Yeah, you know, I kind of felt it coming on. Knew that we'd be racing soon. I feel good about it. You know, we can't treat him any different than anyone else, so we're just going to have to race him like we would anyone else.
And you need to get a hold of the racetrack, because he probably will.
Yeah, they're running real good right now, so, you know, there's a lot of potential here, and I feel we can pull out a pretty good number.
Go get him.
Like the one from the African desert. Here at Memphis Motorsports Park, the heat has got everybody in its grip. Here's the semifinal round of competition in funny car. John Force, under the direction of his crew chief Austin Coyle, who precisely stages him where he needs to be. The opponent, the runner-up just a week ago at Columbus, Ohio, the In-N-Out Burger car driven by Mark Oswald, the former Winston champ. Oswald runs into problems. John Force at a great 5:21 elapsed time at a speed of 298 miles an hour goes into the finals. Steve?
Well, I'm with John Force. In fact, I'm upwind from John Force. He's still wearing that fire suit, starting to get a little gamey. This has been a strange racetrack for you. In '92, you saw Elvis at 1,000 feet on fire.
Well, that's true, and it's hot out here. We're still on fire, and that's why I stay in it, to keep me down. But we got tricked out at Columbus, and we're really watching this heat that it don't bite us again.
You came back in '93 and won right here at Memphis. Got back on the horse.
It's a beautiful, beautiful facility here, and the new owner's going to put millions of dollars into it and make it better for the fans. But I like it just the way it is.
Good luck to you, John, in the final.
Thank you.
Okay, right now, let's go to Big Mac for the other half of the semis.
And what a pairing this was. The Pedregon brothers. Tony Pedregon driving for John Force against his brother, Cruz. Now, Cruz, of course, the wheelman for the McDonald's Pontiac, owned by former NFL All-Star Hall of Fame football coach Joe Gibbs. These two have only met one time before. It was in Topeka a year ago, and at that race, Cruz won. But now it is even. Tony Pedregon evens out the match with his brother. And Tony does exactly what John Force expects him to do, and that is stop the competition with a great 5:29 elapsed time at 288 miles an hour. Watch this again. Just before these two met at the starting line, there was a lane switch. The lane choice was with Cruz. They moved over into the left-hand lane, and as a result, the lane nearest the camera yielded some loss of traction, and Tony streaked to the win. Here with Tony is Bob.
Here they are, the brothers Pedregon, and your first meeting certainly didn't disappoint anybody. Well, maybe Cruz. You won it with a 29.
Well, that's great. I knew it would be a close race, and I got a lot of respect for my brother. I love him, but, you know, there's a war going on out here, and, you know, we're just happy to do it for Castrol, Mac Tools, and Pontiac, all our sponsors.
Did you guys chat a little bit, Cruz, before the race?
No, we're...
Some fuel into that engine. They spin it over with an electric motor on top of the supercharger that spins over the engine. The faithful fans have been jamming these grandstands for 3 consecutive days of almost unbearable heat and humidity. Why? Because they know they are seeing the very best drag racing possible with superstars like John Force and Tony Pedregon duking it out here in the finals. Down at the far end of the racetrack, as the burnouts continue, this time it's Tony Pedregon. The cars look a lot alike. You can tell by the number on the sail panel. But down at the far end of the racetrack, Steve, what's your thoughts on this funny car final?
Well, Mac, I was in the pits as they prepared these 2 cars side by side. There was no banter between the crews, no borrowing of parts or technology. Not a word was spoken. This is for team pride. Each team literally on their own. John Force has taken to calling these 2 cars as of today Dos Diablos, the 2 devils. I think the competition will agree.
Interesting thing about John Force, this has not been one of his better racetracks. Not only did he have that violent crash here a couple of years ago, believe it or not, he was actually beaten by Jerry Caminito at this racetrack. Hasn't been one of his better places, but he would love to put another win up on the boards here this weekend.
Pedregon's crew chief John Medlin told me he doesn't care which lane Force puts him in. He thinks they're both good, and he's got a combination for either one of them, and Tony's got it right up in his head how to pedal his way if he has to.
John Force has an incredible brain trust working for him as crew chiefs. He's got Austin Coyle and Bernie Federley that kind of head up the overall operation. But John Medlin concentrates his effort with his own separate crew on Tony Pedregon's car. And there is a huge amount of rivalry between them. And that was evidenced earlier this year when Pedregon beat the big boss man down in Atlanta. NHRA starter Rick Stewart ever attentive to the condition and status of these cars as they approach the starting line. They will pre-stage as they are now. There are 2 more lights to be lit. Pedregon's ready. Force is ready. Pedregon's car did not respond at the starting line. John Force with a 5.30, 296-mile-an-hour charge wins here at Memphis, and maybe, just maybe, turning around some of the bad luck that he has had on this racetrack. Here is the replay. Watch. You can watch the Pedregon car fall back early. It just did not respond to the hit of the throttle. And I can tell you the way these 2, and then smoke the tires down track, the way these 2 guys go at it, it is a race anytime they meet up. You can rest assured that Pedregon wanted this win very badly, but it went to John Force as the crew celebrates back at the starting line. 5.30, the winning time at 296 miles an hour. Pedregon shut it off early after he smoked the tires and lost traction. His elapsed time, even by closing the throttle, was a 5.55. And there is John Force climbing out of the Castrol Pontiac. Steve?
Maybe finally John Force can take the fire suit off. Then again, he might just sleep in it tonight. It may be his lucky fire suit. But of the Dos Diablos, the car carrying the number 1 was the baddest hot rod here today. A little weak in the final, but hey, we're talking, you got the money.
Yeah, we stepped on our motorcycle really good. It moved out about 100 feet and then started shaking, and see the kid out the window had to step off the gas, but they told me on the radio he peddler too, teaching him all that good stuff. But for Castrol Pontiac Mac Tool Action, we're doing our job, keeping them lit, buddy.
Indeed, great job, John Force. Wins yet another one.
And a huge points lead for Force in the Winston chase over his teammate, Tony Pedregon, who's now 2nd. Cruz Pedregon is 3rd, Al Hoffman 4th, and Mark Oswald is number 5. Top Fuel coming up next. Here's Bob.
How could it be that the Budweiser Top Fuel car
restricted to Top Fuel dragsters?
Here in Funny Cars on Saturday night, again under the lights here at Heartland Park, Topeka, but this time in the near lane. Let's watch John Force as he leaves the starting line on what will turn out to be the quickest funny car run in history at a 4.88.
The elapsed time, 4:88. Nobody ever thought that you could get a time like a 4:88 out of a funny car, but John Force has proved the entire world of drag racing wrong, as he has done so many, many times. John Force, the quickest funny car driver in the world. We are at Heartland Park. Hills advanced into round number 2 with another 300-mile-an-hour run. That's the inscrutable face of Austin Coyle, the crew chief.
for John Force, the top qualifier, the quickest funny car in drag racing history. His opponent in round number 1, the number 16 qualifier, Brad Platt. Platt came to the starting line broken. He knew he was not able to make the run, but he just wanted to show for all the spectators and the folks at home. Force a 498 at 306.
You are still the Force, your 5th consecutive 4-second run, 98.
Yeah, and Coyle and them, they softened it up. You know, they said there ain't no 80 out there. Well, there ain't no 80 out there. You know, ain't going to back up no record. And we knew the kid had a problem over there. But now we just pushed it. It did what it did. But I'll keep the boys at Castrol happy.
Big speed, 306.
Yeah, I don't think the man never has a smile on his eye. He's always smiling. I've never seen him frown.
He's the happiest guy in drag racing right now, that's for sure.
Well, he's got the world by the tail, that's for sure. Kenji Okazaki in the Moon Eyes car, owned and tuned by Jim Dunn. In the far lane, his opponent. No, you're not seeing double. This is a Castrol car, but it is not Force at the wheel. It's Tony Pedregons.
See Kenji get a little out of shape. Tony goes for the win with a great 509. 296, you know, that's just what he needed to move into the next round because Force needs him to take out those competitors.
And that's why they're running 2 cars. Not only do they learn a lot on every run, but he also is using Tony as a blocker, but sometimes that comes up to bite you, as Tony has defeated the boss earlier this year. What better way to start it off than a battle between brothers?
And right now, there's no brotherly love lost here. Both of these guys are going to go out there and really go after each other like they were anybody else in drag racing.
This is a friendly rivalry. They really do enjoy racing each other. It is an incredible family that was sired by the late Frank Pedregons Sr., who was a fixture in Southern California drag racing. Tony had his hands full in the Castrol car. Look at this, 494, and the fastest speed ever recorded by a funny car, 310 miles an hour by Cruz Pedregon. That came in round number 2 racing in a rather warm and muggy afternoon at Heartland Park. Just an indication of how good this racetrack really is.
Dave, we've said it all weekend. Who could believe that we were going to see performances like this? We were just as stunned as anybody when we saw this 310-mile-per-hour run. We knew the horsepower was there, but we didn't think the air was there to do it.
Tony battled it all the way, but Cruz won the race. Steve was there. When you apply 6,000 and just take your pick, anywhere from 6,000 to 7,000 horsepower to those huge Goodyear slicks, something generally has to give. But we've seen very little of it. Chuck Etchell's a moment ago smoking the tires here in round number 2, but it's not been one of those races where everybody's gone up in smoke.
It certainly happens. It certainly is. Almost when something like that happens now, we're almost wondering if something broke on the car, Dave.
Here's the man, John Force. His opponent is Whit Bazemore. These two race a lot, and that races throughout the year. Whit definitely was a challenge, but Force, his 6th consecutive 4-second run. All 4s in qualifying. That was 4 runs, and now 2 in eliminations. The first time anybody has ever done that with a funny car. Here in replay, this was a beautiful run, was it not, KC?
Have we said lately that John Force is dominating funny car? And this is a run that really proves it. This run is picture perfect. Look at that car go right straight down the center of the racetrack. Hard on the tires, a lot of clutch dust coming down the back. This is a fabulous run. Let's see what John has to say about it.
John Force coming out of the Firebird, his 5th consecutive 4-second run. Make that 6 now. And almost all of those over 300 miles an hour. This one 303. You saw Cruz's numbers and you matched them.
Hey, she run 94?
Yep, 96 actually.
I don't know what she ran, but you got a real drag race when you got Bazemore. His car ran that 02, and he's starting to hump them numbers out for Smoking Joe. And Coyle, Tony, that 05, he stepped her. That'll make the boys happy.
Make the boss happy as well. Look at the smile on his face. Now, these two guys have been having a bit of a war of words, Casey Spurlock, earlier this year.
Not just words, but on the racetrack as well. There's been a rivalry between these two for a couple of years now. Nobody wants to get let the other driver get the upper hand on him. Al Hoffman's got to be wondering, though, have I crossed that fine line in that semifinal win? He certainly had his hands full.
in that second round win when he got oh so close to the center line. Al Hoffman was able to dodge that bullet. Oh, this is drag racing like you've never seen. John Force, 7 consecutive 4-second runs, a 4.96. But Hoffman was right with him all the way.
Hoffman was definitely outside of that left window for John. He knew he was there. John was giving it everything he had. Look at the car as it gets close to the finish line. You notice the mile per hour was a little bit down. You can see John Force's car maybe hurt itself just as it went through the lights.
Look at that, a half a car length win for John Force. In the pit area of John Live is Steve.
We are live in the deuce with John Force. What a race with Hoffman. That might have been the quickest side-by-side funny car race ever.
It was really a race. It was shooting ducks down there. Motor was giving up and coming into the first cone, and I even clicked her off a little bit early, and Al was right there.
The fans at home have already seen the record 488. The wheels were in the air at half track. I was worried about you.
Now, I was worried about me because I kept saying, baby, sit down, and she didn't want to listen to me, but she came around and cool, and the boys, Bernie, they got her lined up. They know what they're doing.
All right, who is this man going to race in the final round? Well, Dave McClellan and Casey Spurlock will tell you all.
Well, the man Force has got the advantage based on his 5 Winston Championship titles, Casey.
Not that John Force hasn't had any competition this year, but this might be the hardest challenge John Force has faced so far in the 1995 NHRA Winston Championship point chase. Cruz Pedregon definitely has the horsepower to beat John Force here, and John Force knows it, but don't underestimate John Force.
Yeah, I was just going to say, remember, it was Force at this car doing the burnout and getting those huge Goodyear tires as hot as he can, trying to gain even more traction. And look at Pedregon doing the same. I just talked with Lee Beard, who was sitting on the wall, looked like a little kid with his legs swinging back and forth, and he was giddy. He said, this is what it's all about. And then one of the press guys came in and said, Bob, what do you think? And I'll tell you, I think today, this run, the red car is the better of the two.
And I would say, you Pedregon fans, if the red car at half track is within a half a car length of John Force, his huge 311-mile-an-hour top-end charge will prevail. The two different personalities, you couldn't ask for more. Force loses his goose as comfortable in that car as he is in his rent-a-car. Cruz Pedregon is a worrier. He worries about how he looks. He worries about his reaction times, his burnouts. If Cruz can put it all together, I agree with Bob.
Well, let me be maybe the devil's advocate here, because if you will recall, it was John Force who stunned everybody with a 4.88 elapsed time in qualifying under conditions that are nearly identical to this. Casey, what's your thoughts?
John Force is the most comfortable funny car driver there is out there today. Even when I was racing, John Force always was very, very comfortable in that car, and you knew that going into the lane against him. You know that you cannot trick John Force on the starting line. Cruz Pedregon's just going to have to go up there and try to outpower him, because he certainly can't outsmart John Force.
This is one race that plays right into the hands of that man, Dave Settles, and Austin Coyle, the crew chief for John Force. Why? Because the racetrack can take all the power you want to throw at it. Let's settle back and watch one of the classic battles in funny car competition as the two 300-mile-an-hour runners, the new national record holder in the far lane, Cruz Pedregon, tangles with a 6-time champion thus far this season, John Force. Driving around at the top end of the racetrack, a 493 at 300 miles an hour, using a 200th of a second advantage at the starting line. John Force has just won his 7th race of the year. 10 races have been contested. He has won 7 of them. Can anybody top this season? Cruz Pedregon tried to stop him, but guys, I hate to tell you, the big mile-an-hour charge was not there. Watch in replay. You see the advantage Force gained.
This is a great drag race. Both cars with a lot of power, both cars putting it all to the racetrack. John Force just, again, seems to come up with that little bit of an edge when he needs it. He needed big horsepower, and he got it. Like Austin Coyle said, run the ET, let the mile per hour come to us. 303 miles per hour for John Force.
And look at the Castrol crew. Yep, you bet. They celebrated. Austin Coyle with a smile at the win light. Steve?
John Force, a 493, fantastic victory. You're going to interview yourself anyway, so here's the mic.
I didn't get the record. Cruz got the record. We got the win here, and I want to say here tonight to sponsors, you know who we are. person we miss out there that's not on the guardrail taking pictures, Leslie Lovett. I wanted to give him 8. I ran into 4s. I wanted to give him 8 of them in a row because that guy, he didn't care about interviews that you gave. He didn't care about the people. All Leslie Lovett cared about was an ET slip. He said, that's what Perdone's after. That's what we went after. We got you 8 of them, Lovett. We love you and we miss you. I'm pretty excited. This is a great race for all my sponsors, Castrol, Pontiac, Mac Tool, and I wanted that 8 deal. I said, Coyle, don't go record and lose it. Where am I going with this interview? I don't even care.
It was a wonderful thought, John, and we all agree and appreciate it.
We love you, Lovett. Patsy.
John Force, there's nobody like him. Look at the lead he has in the Winston standings over Cruz Pedregon. Tony Pedregon is in 3rd. Al Hoffman is 4th. And Mark Oswald, number 5. For a look at Top Fuel and a thought or two maybe on Funny Car, here's Bob.
Scott Coletta getting sued.
I predicted that this race would see the mountain's first ever 300-mile-an-hour run. I didn't think it would come from a funny car. Friday night, under the lights, John Force, an incredible 504. More incredibly, 301 miles an hour. But John scared himself a bit at the far end. The lighting, the reflections, he couldn't stop, and into the sand he went.
I don't know what happened on the parachutes. I come up over the mountain, and I couldn't get her down, but I was lost because I had a lack of vision. So I'm looking for lighting, and I'm lost. And I see the 2 lights over the top of the mountain, and I thought, whoa, that must be the shutoff area. I'm okay. Next thing I knew, I'm in the net. And I didn't realize I was that far because I couldn't see because I was past the lights. Never had a problem here. It must have shook me for a ways. Something happened.
Force and crew knew this morning in round number 1 with the sun beating on the racetrack, they couldn't run another 504. They backed it down and still ran low ET of that entire round at 5:22 over Keith Jackson. That puts Force in round 2 against young Del Worsham. Mac, what are the other pairings?
With that performance that put him into the semifinals. Here's John Force backing up after his patented long, smoky burnout. Austin Coyle is crew chief out directing traffic for the 8th time this year. John qualified number 1 and defeated Keith Jackson in the first round. His opponent, Del Worsham, the youngster, the number 9 qualifier, defeated number 8, Gary Bolger, in his first round confrontation. Force, one of the best funded teams in all of drag racing, operating 2 cars. Tony Pedregon running the 2nd Castrol machine. And Force and his co-crew chiefs Austin Coyle and Bernie Federley say you learn so much more when 2 cars go down the racetrack in each round. Here's a team that operates basically on their own limited budget. Del and his dad, Chuck Worsham, up now against the 5-time Winston champion. All the credentials in the world didn't scare Del Worsham one bit. He put a hole shot, a starting line advantage on John Force that almost won him a race. But John, with a 5:21, came back to take the win at over 290 miles an hour. Look at that. The reaction time advantage going to Del Worsham. 0.08 of a second at the starting line. But then his car started to give him trouble. The fuel delivery system went haywire. It dropped the cylinders, lost the power, and lost the race.
John Boy, Del Worsham slammed you on the tree, but you had the power to get it back.
As our game plan, actually, Coyle was going for lane choice. He said, shallow stage, if it runs good, we'll beat him. And I said, I hate doing that, but we're trying to get the deal over Cruz, and we got it. Yeah, the kid was out there. I had to chase him down.
Next pair of cars already into the burnout procedure. It is Al Hoffman in the near lane in the Western Auto Parts America car. His opponent, the teammate of John Force, that is Tony Pedregon, the brother of Cruz. After 10 races of a 19-race series, Al Hoffman came into this event in the number 4 spot in the Winston Chase. His opponent here, Tony Pedregon, is right behind his boss, John Force. Hoffman qualified second with a 5:11 and defeated Brad Platt in the first round. Tony Pedregon was the number 7 qualifier with a 5:26. Whit Bazemore fell in round number 1 to Tony Pedregon. Tommy Anderson, the crew chief on Al Hoffman's car. Look at that camera shot. That's looking back
over the spoiler, and that is the operations and hospitality tower here at this magnificent Vandermeer Speedway. And this Mopar Parts Mile High Nationals, an overflow crowd all 3 days at this event. Oh, Tony Pedregons lost traction in the middle of the race course, and Al Hoffman, with both parachutes out, slows after a run of 5:22 at 290 miles an hour. As we look at this pass again in replay, you see Tony Pedregons got a pretty good start, but it does not last very long. There he loses traction just a little bit, tries to feather the throttle, and all it can do is spin the tires. Meantime, Hoffman is long gone with a 5:22 elapsed time. He definitely is keeping pace with John Force and Cruz Pedregons. Let's take a look at it one more time. We're riding on board. Wow, that big building gets small real quick. There's the finish line, and the parachutes come out for Al Hoffman. 2 more races coming up in consecutive weekends. The crew chiefs walk away from the cars. It's John Force in the near lane. Cruz Pedregons trying for only his 3rd final round appearance of the season. And he came close to getting it, but it is John Force. What an incredible year this driver is having. 5:22 at 279 miles an hour. As we watch again in replay, Pedregons had the advantage at the starting line. But as he neared the halfway point on the racetrack, look at the exhaust coming out of the McDonald's car. It'll start flashing flame, doing strange things. When it does that, it's losing power. That's the point John Force was able to pull ahead. The final pairing will find John Force with his consistent 5:20s. Look at the times up against Chuck Etchells. Steve?
Hey, John, take all your fans at home for a ride. Tell them what happened on that race.
I don't really know. I was kind of not worried much about lane choice, and I went in kind of deep on old Cruiser, but she was just a weak old pooch. I don't know what happened. Just kind of mumbled down through there, didn't smoke the tires, didn't have no power, and I thought, we ain't looking good here, boys. And all of a sudden, the old hot rod started running. He must have struggled. But for Castrol, Pontiac, Mac Tool, the boys, and Tony, we're still in there, buddy. That's why I love you.
Mumbled on down there. That's a new one.
Hey, you never... Funny car competition, and one thing has happened here, folks. John Force has been exceeded in his burnout. Chuck Etchells took his on-the-power burnout about half track. The crowd absolutely went crazy. Let's see if it pays off in a winning effort for Etchells in the far lane. You're on board the Kendall Dodge. And Force thunders past as Chuck Etchells loses traction, and yet again, another 5:22 at 294 miles an hour. Force wins his 8th title of the season. Coming off the starting line, it was nearly identical reaction time. But Etchells' car moved harder. He pulled ahead of Force. There, he started losing traction. And at that point, it was all over but the shouting for Etchells, because here came the freight train that is Force. To the finish line, a substantial margin of victory for John Force.
Old Etchells was in your face from the burnout on.
That's what I love about him. He don't play games. I was in trouble there. I shook real hard. I hated stepping off the gas, but you know, Castrol, Pontiac, Mac Tool, boys, that's what they pay us for. Good old hot rod, that Kendall car. We love to race him, and all the people pray him online. It's a good old day. And are they watching this live at home? Nope.
Close.
Well, we'll take it. To the ones at home, we love you, and you're why we're here. Here he is.
That was a dandy.
Ah, look at this. Etchells over to congratulate Force, who's got a substantial, more than substantial lead in the Winston chase. Cruz Pedregons has advanced to 2nd. His brother Tony drops to 3rd. Hoffman and Etchells round in peace on that race car. Is as squeaky clean as they can get it. They're trying to make the semifinals here at the Autolite Nationals. John Force and Chuck Etchells, a rerun of the final round just 1 week ago at the High Country in Denver, Colorado, where John Force took the win. He's had quite a weekend here as well. Qualified with the only 4-second elapsed time of 4:98 at 3:03. Ran a 5:03 to beat Kenji Okazaki. From his number 8 qualifying spot, Chuck Etchels beat Del Worsham with a 5:11. And earlier, Steve had an opportunity to take a look at Chuck Etchels and his hard-working staff. Continues to practice in coming months his Johnny Miller grip. Chuck Etchels only hopes his crew chief Tim Richards has a grip on things here. Etchels slows as Force goes across the finish line. Maybe some problems for Etchels. 5:06 at 300 miles an hour. Another picture-perfect run for John Force. Let's take a look again. The action time nearly identical by the two drivers. Etchels kept pace for a little while at least. And then at about mid-track, something started to go wrong on his Kendall GT1 machine, and Force took an easy win. Riding with Chuck Etchels, you see a flash of flame down there in the window as he hits the fire bottles, and the stuff comes up in the cockpit, knocking down the flames underneath the body. Down to the far end, here's Steve.
Well, another 5:06, another 300. Anything interesting going on inside there?
No, it's hunting around. It's getting down to past half track, getting way over against the wall. I called Tony back and said, I'm in trouble down there. Keep her in the middle, even though she is running 3. But Dencham, I know you're laying there in a bed, taking it easy. Now quit this and see us in Seattle. You're starting to aggravate me. Old Hot Rod's finally starting to run with the dam. Now you want to go to the doctor's office and play safe.
He'll be looking for you now, John.
Steve, everybody looks for John Force, and it'll be one of these two drivers that will meet him in the semifinals. Either his teammate, Tony Pedregons, driving the second Castrol GTX Pontiac, or arch rival Al Hoffman at the wheel of the Western Auto Parts America car. Tony qualified 5th with a 5:11, beat Gary Bolger in the first round, while Hoffman qualified with a 5:09 and duplicated that against Tom Hoover in the first round. Hoffman, the defending champion here at this event. John Force was his victim in the final round 1 year ago. Tom Anderson, the crew chief, dropping the body, making a final adjustment on the fuel injection system, and his Al's wife, Helen, putting him into the proper spot on the starting line. Hoffman had problems right off the line, and they continued through the quarter mile as Tony Pedregons steps up. A 5:07 at 303 miles an hour. Now here's a wild shot looking backwards from Al Hoffman's car. Oh my goodness, do things get small very, very quickly. The parachutes are out, and the run for Hoffman was a 5:14 at 299 miles an hour. Here are the pairings for the semifinals, where with Bazemore, if he can get the car repaired, will have lane choice over Cruz Pedregons, and John Force picks his lane over his teammate, Tony Pedregons. Steve?
It ran pretty good, and that was a lane check, I think, in some ways. It ran a 5:07 down the lane nobody wants.
Well, that's great. You know, we really felt that there was no big advantage in the lanes, and, you know, Al's a tough guy to beat. We knew we had to step her up, and Medlin did a good job. Al, good job, Tony.
Now you get to have a little intramural fun with the boss in the Final Four.
Yeah, we're going to do it again. You know, we like to stay away from him, but, you know, if we have to race, we're just going to go after him.
And it's heads up.
Tony begins the celebration that I'm sure he... So Witt now has 1 week to try to recover before he is in action again up at Seattle. I think you see a WR. 2 Castrol Pontiacs on the starting line. Teammate John Force and Tony Pedregons. The advantage here all weekend long has gone to Force. But Tony did prove that that lane furthest from our camera can yield not only good elapsed times, but good speeds as well, as he ran that fine 5:07 at 303 miles an hour in the previous round. A tremendous amount of shared information between these two teams. That's the reason you run 2 cars, is to learn more with every round of qualifying or elimination. On a flash came out of Tony Pedregons' car, but Force was on a pass. 5:07, 299 miles an hour. He goes into the finals to face Cruz Pedregon, where the lane choice resides with the Castrol machine. In the top fuel pit area, that's the top 5. Lots of shuffling going on here in round number 2 of the 3-race Summer Swing. Here's the final in Nitro Funny Car. That's Lee Beard, the team manager for the McDonald's team. And earlier, Steve had a look at this funny car and some problems they've been having. This has developed into one of the great rivalries in all forms of motorsports. Cruz Pedregon against John Force. It was Cruz that broke the string of John's Winston Championship when he took that title just a couple of 3 years ago. But here, Force on paper at least, is the favorite. A phenomenal race and a very successful effort by the McDonald's team. They read all of those parts to perfection. 5:05 at 291 miles an hour with justification. They celebrate. The time for Force, 5:07 at 301. The margin of victory at the finish line was only 0.02 of a second, as Pedregon knows what he has accomplished here. As he gets out of the race car, the emotion of the moment beginning to, taking a little bit of a shadow boxing roll there. Watch this one in replay. 0.02 of a second advantage at the flash of the green went to John Force in the Castrol car. But that was easily and quickly overcome by Pedregon. Force ran 10 miles an hour faster, but Pedregon had the quicker elapsed time and the victory by 0.02 of a second. And they're coming back indeed. Cruz up into the number 2 spot behind John Force. Tony, Cruz's brother's third, followed by Al Hoffman and Chuck Etchell. And look at this. Happy time indeed. John Force over to offer his congratulations to the team and to Cruz Pedregon. Top fuel fight.
The downside for Kenji is in round number 1, John Force rallied with a 5:02. He will race Kenji, but Force will have the lane choice, and that left-hand side of the racetrack where Force will put him is a little bit bumpy. But Big Jim Dunn, he'd spend about $1 billion at Kenji's yen if that's what it takes to beat him. And Kenji has the best reaction times consistently of any other driver.
Oswald, and of course, that Force Okazaki race. Here's Brad Platt, the team of Brewster and Platt. This is the Castrol GTX machine driven by Tony Pedregon. The Winston point standings, while not a total runaway, just about. Look at the lead John Force has over number 2, Cruz Pedregon. Lots and lots of rounds needed by Pedregon, and Force has got to lose early. Very often to give the cruiser even any kind of hope for his second Winston title. Brewster and Black qualified on 1 run and then got a break when Ray Higley, who had qualified with his best run ever, red-lighted in the first round. Chuck Etchells was the victim of Tony Pedregon, who came on board at the start of the season as the team driver. That is John Medlin. He is the crew chief on the Tony Pedregon car with a lot of help from Austin Coyle and Bernie Federley. Assembled, those 3 crew chiefs have probably 100+ years of experience in this sport of drag racing, and certainly a tremendous amount of knowledge. All that wisdom tuned Tony to a 5:15 in his round 1 victory over Chuck Etchells. That earned him lane choice over Brad Platt. And as Steve noted, Platt's lane's got some bumps in it. Platt never got to the bumps. His problem started right off the line for Tony Pedregon. Another 5:15. He advances to the semifinals.
Well, Tony, when you only need teens, run teens. That's smart.
Yeah, that's right. You know, we're trying to keep the car solid, and you know, teens are working right now. I think as we get a little farther, we're going to have to step it up, but just trying to keep this Castrol Pontiac in the show.
Has used it so many times, that amazing amount of power and traction combination to drive around his opponent after the advantage goes to the opposite lane. The crew following the same procedures they do on every run. Big Jim Dunn is the car owner, the engine builder, and tuner for Kenji Okazaki. That is Austin Coyle, the crew chief, the wizard that makes Force the winner that he is. The Moon Eyes machine, the bright yellow Dodge Avenger, the Castrol Pontiac for Force. That race was everything we thought it would be. Kenji with a very, very slight advantage off the starting line, only 0.02 of a second. The difference in performance, a full 1/10 of a second. Watch in replay. Kenji getting the advantage at the start. That's not unusual. Force beginning to make it up early on in the race course, and then as they neared the finish line, Force at a speed of over 303 miles an hour blew past Kenji to take the win to advance to yet another semifinal round of competition. Steve?
You had to be concerned with Kenji. He was having the best day in a long time.
I seen a whole lot of yellow, a whole lot of that big old Japanese sign out there for a ways, but it covered him up down track. But you know Jim Dunn, he'll throw a number at you, and Kenji's always got good lights, and he had one there.
So John Force, one of our 4 semifinalists. Johnny West serving as the crew chief for the Richard Hartman-driven Team Geronimo car. Quite a mountain challenges him here, and we're not talking about Mount Rainier. We're saying it is the Castrol machine of John Force, driven by Tony Pedregon, that may prove to be the immovable object. Hartman up in smoke, and something goes wrong on the Pedregon car. You saw the raw fuel come out of it. Johnny West a bit dejected, and there it was. The blower drive belt, the supercharger drive system failed at about half track, and Tony coasts across to a 587. That's not going to be good for trying to hold lane choice in the final round, because the pair coming up is one of the great rivalries in all of motorsports. The Team McDonald's car driven by Cruz Pedregon against John Force and the Castrol machine. Let's go to the far end and Steve.
Tony, with that lack of performance, it's a wonder we're talking here.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, that thing left good. It carried the front end, and I was really surprised it backfired or something, but apparently they had a problem, and, well, we got a little good luck on that run.
You saw all the raw fuel coming out of the engine on the Tony Pedregon-driven machine, a good indication that something had really gone amiss, and when the blower drive belt came snaking out from underneath it, that was the answer. Here was the run 1 week ago down at Sears Point, California, the same protagonist. This time it was Cruz Pedregon winning with a tremendous run, a 5:05 and a 5:02 respectively. Larry Frazier directing Pedregon into the staging beams. Austin Coyle doing the same for John Force. And it was Cruz Pedregon losing traction. You saw the smoke coming off the rear tires. John Force wins it. Look at the elapsed time. The first 4-second run of the weekend for funny cars. 4:99 at 302. Cruz not that far behind. He ran a 5:01. See why when John Force and Cruz Pedregon come to the starting line, you'd best pay attention, because it happens quick, and it is oh so close at the finish line. What a win for Force. And it is the Castrol teammates, Force and Tony Pedregon, in the finals. Steve?
You needed every inch of that 499.
Yeah, he was out there. I don't know what happened on the start line. I thought I was on time, but we're excited to put Castrol Pontiac into a final. Mainly, we're going to hoppo Tony up here, and we're going to have us a drag race here, I promise you.
We're going to have an all-Castrol final in funny car competition. John Force goes off against his teammate, Tony Pedregon, and the word from the boss man to Tony is, beat me if you can. John Medlin, the crew chief for Tony Pedregon, Austin Coyle, and Bernie Fetterly, the head wrenches on John Force's machine. He's the one that bears the #1 right up there behind the side window. That's about the only way you can tell them apart. Force with a 499 in the previous round earned himself the lane choice. Tony's hoping that the crew has been able to get the repairs necessary to put him in a competitive posture against the boss. Couldn't ask for much better than that, could you? 4.96 seconds. The collective crew celebrates 302 miles an hour. But Tony Pedregon was not to be denied. He at least won the battle of the starting line, gained the reaction time advantage over John. But it was a 5:02, 292-mile-an-hour losing effort. You see some flames coming out of the car at the far end of the track, indicating possibly a dropped cylinder or two. But a perfect run for John Force, and low elapsed time of the meet at a 4:96. Steve?
Hey, John, I'll tell you, you're in trouble there about 300-400 feet out.
I was going to deep stage him because he's real good on the lights. I've been watching him all weekend. And yeah, I saw a lot of green to about 400 or 500 feet, and then my old heap started to run. So for Castrol and Pontiac Mac Tool and the guys at Action, that's what it does.
Can you get as big a hoot out of beating Tony as, say, Cruz or Hoffman?
No, I think I go back years ago to 92 when old Cruiser took me out, but Tony's a sweetheart. You got to love him, and he's a champion. That's what we're building. We're trying to shove him up to #2. He moved up on Cruz on points today, and that's critical. But he's a great kid.
Talking about the point standings, John has got almost that runaway lead we talked about earlier. Cruz is in second, but Tony is closing fast on his brother. Al Hoffman, Chuck Etchels, they are 4th and 5th.
So the first motors come to life here with the Big Bud Shootout. $100,000 up for grabs. First pair will find Chuck Etchels going up against Tony Pedregon. Etchels, the number 4 seed. Tony Pedregon, the number 5 seed. John Medlin leads this pair, this crew for the Castrol team. Of course, we'll see teammate of Tony Pedregon in a little bit, John Force. And there is Chuck Etchels. And Frank, I think this one is really going to be a war out of the 4 pairs we're going to see.
Well, there's going to be a lot of good racing today, Ralph. But I'll tell you, Tony Pedregon's got to feel pretty confident in that team car of John Force. He's got a lot of power. Chuck Etchels has been a little hot and cold this year, but when he's hot, he's real hot, and he could be the guy that could certainly stop Tony in this first round.
Well, you know, I think the biggest key, and Steve, you're probably the best one to read this, is going to be the track temperature and the weather outside.
Oh, absolutely, Ralph. I don't have a thermometer down here. I don't need one. I have my brow. I can tell you it is the hottest it has been throughout this U.S. Nationals Labor Day weekend. Plus, the sun is directly overhead with very little cloud cover beating down in this racetrack. Anybody that tries to duplicate their qualifying times from earlier may be in trouble.
What does it do to your setup?
Well, you know, when it gets hot like that, we were talking earlier, and I mentioned that you think maybe you just back things down a little bit just to soften it up some, but the problem is those fuel motors have so much nitro going through them, they need a lot of clutch to burn all that nitro, and if you back it down just a little bit, soften that clutch, sometimes you can have what they say a drop cylinder where it'll misfire, and if you want to slow your car down 500, so you make an attempt to, sometimes you might slow it down 0.3 of a second, and you just can't afford to do that, so it's not that easy to just back the power down a little bit. They're going to have to try and keep that performance level high.
Well, you saw both John Medlin and Tim Richards making adjustments. Do they seem nervous, Bob?
Now, both teams are pretty confident right here. There's that always ever-present danger of being a little overcautious in that first round, but these are very seasoned pros here that are duking it out in round one.
Both cars set to go. First pair in the Big Bud Shootout. Etchels goes up in a plume of smoke. Pedregon gets the win. He didn't have the quicker reaction time as well, but a 5.16 at 297 miles an hour. Not exactly the performance we've seen out of him there this weekend. Could be a factor of the weather.
Well, it could have been, and, you know, Austin Coyle might have been a little conservative. I'm not real sure, but, you know, the tire smoke there from Etchels is maybe indicative of the better 60-foot time that he had on his side of the racetrack. The car launched real hard. They were going for the throat, and it just didn't work out.
Let's see what John Medlin has to say.
5.16, not overpowering, but then you didn't overpower the racetrack.
No, we tried not to overpower it. He may have had the pedal out there. I saw a little whoop of the tire, but we may have been marginally over-aggressive, but we're going to need to run 16 to a 10 here to win this.
John Medlin going to go get his winning driver. Let's go back to the booth.
Because they're Pedregon, they slowed their car down.
Let's take a look at the replay. The launch of key, and it was Pedregon who was out first. There's a little bit of a pedal coming out of Tony's car.
Yeah, you saw both cars about 150, 200 feet down the track lose a little bit of traction, and Chuck Etchels is a star at overcoming that tire smoke, but that time Tony Pedregon seemed to have done the better job.
And of course, the key for Tony Pedregon is going to be, he's going to get to see what happens with John Force as well, and utilize that information as well, Steve Evans.
Tony Pedregon's job description is take out the enemy, and you did just that with Chuck Etchels.
That's right. There was a Kendall car in our way, and I had to pedal it. It's a little warm out there, and, you know, we just wanted to come out here and win. Castrol, Pontiac, Mac Tools, that's just one step closer to that Big Bud check.
And, guys, I think that John Medlin made the right call. That 5.16 was just conservative enough.
List without including the name of Austin Coyle, who does all the tuning for John Force.
By far the most famous of the crew chiefs in the Big Bud Shootout is Austin Coyle, the man who has guided John Force to 5 Winston championships. But Fuel Coops and Coyle go way back to a partnership with John Farconis and Pat Minnick and the legendary Chi-Town Hustler.
I met them guys through a speed shop that we both dealt with in the Chicago area. When I'd gotten my super stock car, I was looking for some guys with Hemi experience, and that's where I was introduced to John Farconis and Pat Minnick.
The Windy City team's fortunes really took off with the addition of Canadian Frank Hawley in the cockpit.
Frank joined us as a driver in 1980. In 82, we made our first try at the series, and we were fortunate enough to win the championship and the Big Bud Shootout.
After a pair of Winston titles, Coyle and crew eventually went their separate ways. And then came a phone call from John Force that would change Coyle's life.
My own team was without sponsors. Our driver was leaving. We were trying to figure out how we could carry on with minimum sponsor support, and essentially John called me up and made me an offer I couldn't refuse.
That joining of forces has produced 5 Winston championships, nearly 60 national event wins, and 3 Big Bud Shootout titles. And despite his reputation as Force's foil, Coyle seems content.
I expect to be here as long as I continue to drag race, and I hope I got another 10 years in me.
And what is the origin of Austin's trademark toothpick?
You know, it actually came from when I used to dirt bike a lot, and my dirt biking buddy, you know, just couldn't stand me smoking cigars in the pickup truck on the way to go riding. And one day I threw them away and discovered using a toothpick for a pacifier, you know, was okay to get along with.
And if Force wins the $100,000 today, plenty of supply of toothpicks for Austin Coyle after today. Before he can cash the check, he has to get by Gary Bolger, Force's opponent, in round 1. Motors coming back to life as we get set for the third pair here in round number 1. This will be the matchup of John Force and Gary Bolger. Force moves into the water box, set to heat up those big tires. Gary Bolger now will do the same thing. And as we've seen Pedregon, Tony Pedregon has already made his run. They've had a chance to look at that. And they've also seen what Cruz does. Does John really go after it now?
Oh, absolutely. You know, this is what I was talking about earlier. Austin's not going to change anything. You know, the Pedregon run, you know, he had to pedal it, so they were actually trying to go faster than that 16.
Well, it took just a few minutes to get the Creasy family racing entries fired up, but now they're ready for the burnout. Was there a problem down there with the Creasy car?
No, that's just the way they do things. It's a low-budget operation. They always let the other team fire first, go out and make that long burnout. They run a lot less fuel in this, doesn't put as much wear and tear on the race car, and that's their basic game plan. So there's nothing wrong with that Creasy family racing team. This is just their normal operation.
How much fuel can you use up on a burnout? How much does that save?
Well, you know, they'll go through, you know, 15 gallons or more from the time they start the engine till after the run, and a lot of that is used not just during the burnout, but actually backing up from the burnout. A lot of idle time, it puts it through a tremendous amount of fuel, and you can save gallons of fuel just by not idling the car as long.
They'll bring the Creasy car into position, and Austin will put John Force right into the lights. There you see Austin Coyle right where he wants him. So Tony Pedregon has advanced. Now, can John Force put the other Castrol car into the next round? Can he ever? How about a 5.0 at 303 miles an hour? That's the advantage of having a second car, making a 5.08.
Well, exactly, and so much for the hot day and the hot track, and we're not going to run real fast. And I think that's what I was saying earlier is Austin knows that if you try and slow him down much, you fall right off the fence, and he's just not going to let that happen.
The Creasy car develops problems shortly after the launch. Gary Bolger drops out, and Force motors on to the next round. Impressive performance out of the Castrol car, and John Force is in search of another Big Bud huge paycheck.
He is indeed, Ralph. John, man, I'll tell you, that was cool. 5.08.
Oh, wait, still Cruiser's 05?
Yeah.
Yeah, the boy's trying to sneak around. I really thought it was weak leaving. Old Creasy was out there so far. I thought, what the hell, did she drop a hole or what?
Now, you're going to race Tony Pedregon, your own teammate in the next round. Don't tell me that's going to be a fair fight. Not for $100,000. It's not good business.
Hey, it's all for that Budweiser. What can I tell you?
He's not going to tip that off.
Here's a look at the pairing panels for the semifinals. Force would have to go up against his teammate. John would get lane choice. And in the other semifinal pair, Tony Pedregons.
When John Force decided to add another car to his Fuel Coupe team, he tapped John Medlin as the crew chief. And for the Arkansas native, working in racing is a dream come true.
When I was going to high school and growing up, I never would have dreamed in my wildest imaginations that they'd pay us to do this.
Like most racers, the competition bug bit John at an early age.
Basically in high school with hot rods, just like pretty much anybody would do, and ran the local drag strips there and got interested in building cars, and really what made them work is what interested me.
Medlin's first time in the NHRA spotlight came when he took on the crew chief chores with Don Prudhomme's Skull Bandit, and he was able to bring results to that sometimes troubled team. That was followed by a stint with Chuck Etchells before coming aboard Team Force.
It was real interesting working out in the industry, viewing John from the outside and his operation, and then coming here. And a lot of the mystery begins to unfold when you meet the personalities of Austin Coyle, Bernie Federle, and the motivation that John gives the team. Once you get here and you see all that, it's a real clear-cut picture of why they're successful.
And how does he view the boss and his reputation as a wild man?
And that's part of the motivation that he uses to stimulate the people and keep us all motivated. His interest in the sport and his dedication to it is a foregone conclusion. The rest of it is entertainment.
Well, John Medlin usually has a tough enough time trying to beat people like Dave Settles and Jim Ermolovich, who you met earlier on. Now, he had to tune Tony Pedregon past Coyle and Federle. Could he do it? Here's a look at that race. So the #1 points guy, the guy who has the baddest hot rod in the land, sits in the lane nearest. He had lane choice. And the guy with the second baddest hot rod in the land sits in the other lane. What do you do now?
Well, you know, sometimes you might think that John had asked Tony to lay down for him, but this isn't about Winston points. This is about cold, hard cash today.
So Austin Coyle will back up John Force. Medlin backs in Tony Pedregon. What do you think, Steve? Does one of them lay down?
I think John Force will win because he has the better car. He said earlier this year, I didn't hire this kid to teach him how to lose. I just really can't see it in John's nature to say, hey, kid, die for me. Not built that way.
I heard Tony Pedregon told me before this one, I said, were there any conversations between you and Force? He said, no, all he did was look over and wave at me. The crews have done everything they can to get these two cars ready. Tony Pedregon felt that pedaling in the first round cost him 0.05 of a second. That might be the difference between him finding that O that he's going to need to put away John Force here in the semis. I don't think anybody laid down. I think John Force just has an awesome car. How about a 501, 306 miles an hour? 524, 293, the losing numbers for Tony Pedregon. It's hard to beat that whether you lay down or you run with everything you got.
Well, and I think that the guys in the other lane were giving it everything they got, but Austin and Bernie got that car flying. It runs as consistent as a bracket car, and I think they've just served notice to the next pair.
There you see Force storming through the lights at the far end. 501, 306 miles an hour. John Force moves on to the finals of the Big Bud Shootout. He'll be going for his 4th Big Bud win.
Well, John Force trying to get the hat off. You hate racing that kid, don't you?
Hate it. Running again?
501, 306.
Yeah, shallow stage, they're going in. Don't like to do that against Tony. Just trying to make sure we go after that lane choice, the crews. Going to be a lot of money here Budweiser's giving away, and Tony and all of us, we're going to split it because we're going to get it.
So, who would John Force go up against? The Big Bud Shootout. There's the two cars. John Force, the Castrol GTX machine in the near lane, and Cruz Pedregon, the McDonald's crew in the far lane. Larry Frazier with the bottle in hand, ready to turn the motor over. The big 6,000 horsepower motors come roaring to life. How big of a key is lane choice going to be, Frank?
Well, I think that these crews know exactly what's going on. I don't, at this point, think lane choice is going to be a big issue, but I'll tell you, these guys are really excited now. You know, there's not very many jobs where they measure your ability to perform by 100th of a second, and if you don't do it right by 100th of a second, you can lose yourself $100,000.
Couple of $100,000 burnouts. How's the weather conditions down there, Bob? Is it cooled down?
No, it's really not any better than it was earlier in the day. A couple of quick things. Both of the crew chiefs think the track is pretty even on both sides. I don't think lane choice is a factor. I think we're going to go back to what we said in the second round when the two Castrol cars met. I just think John Force has too much talent and too much race car here for anybody else in the field right now. He's the #1 qualifier, as you guys mentioned here. He's been in the 4-second range. He's a money player. Cruz needs to get a good run, needs to stay away from beating himself, and even if he does all that, I'm not sure he can take out the green car.
Well, let's face it, guys, these are the two best funny car teams in the world today, but one is just a little bit better than the other, and that is John Force. If they run according to form, Force will beat Cruz by about a car length, probably a 498, 499, maybe a 5 flat. If John makes the slightest mistake, a little bobble, Cruz will nose him out.
Don't forget, John Force is going for his 4th Big Bud Shootout win. Cruz still looking for his 1st.
You know, everybody talks about somebody winning by 500ths or a 10th of a second. And in drag racing, we really get used to that as being a long time. But I'll tell you, in real life, a second is a short period of time. And it's just incredible how close the competition is when you take cars like this. They're so volatile, they're so fast, there's so much power, there's so many things that can happen, and have them run within a few hundredths of a second of each other. That's really a close drag race.
I think the key also to John Force this year is he's had the luck. He has really been on top of his game, and sometimes, as they say, you'd rather be lucky than good, as Larry Frazier puts Cruiser into the lights. Force is ready, you know, big money on the line. He is going to be on top of his game. I think it's going to take at least a low 5-0 to get the win. To a losing 510. John Force, 306 miles an hour. I don't care if it's luck. I don't care if it's the crew. I don't care what it is. He's got $100,000, Bob.
Austin, you boys are bad.
Well, been having one heck of a season here. Myself, Bernie Federley, John Medlin, John Force, our sponsors, everybody's doing a great job, and we're just keeping our act together one round at a time.
This is only half of the pair you'd like to get today and tomorrow. That'd really make it a nice weekend.
You bet your life it would be, and like just one round at a time, we'll see what we can do.
Another round, another $100,000. Boys, back to you.
Let's take one more look at it.
You know, Cruz did everything he could. He had a 200th of a second advantage on the starting line, but you just can't get away from the power that Austin Coyle makes. And, you know, Austin had a plenty big smile there because he gets a little percentage of whatever that car makes on that track, so he's smiling for more than one reason.
I'm sure it's just a little percentage. And look at Austin. Watch the reaction. Medlin's happier than Coyle is. Look
Coyle just about lost his toothpick.
Well, he's got all the toothpicks he can stand up. I wonder how many toothpicks you can get for $100,000, Steve.
Well, I'm sure you could get a lot of gold ones for $100,000. John, that was just a fantastic way to end the Big Bud Shootout.
I don't know what she ran. She was running good, and you know, she went out there and big money up with Bud, $100,000, and a lot of things happened this week, and it's kind of strange, Steve, but excited anytime you can beat Cruz.
Indeed, a beautiful trophy from Budweiser. Karen Holschlag here to present it. We'll be back to wrap it up from Indianapolis Raceway Park. Stay with us, everyone. The excitement of the Big Bud Shootout isn't quite over yet.
Finished, what, runner-up here back in 1994. Yeah, in the U.S. Nationals. And one of the stories that we're going to be following in Funny Car is the big dollars up for grabs and the guy who stands the best chance of cashing in those big checks, John Force. Now, here's the way it all breaks down. John has already won $100,000 yesterday for picking up his 4th Big Bud Shootout victory. If he wins today, there's $75,000 in purse money set up for Funny Car, plus some $25,000 in contingency money, and then a $50,000 bonus from the NHRA if you can double up. And Casey, the last guy to do that who doubled up was John Force here in 1993 when he did both. Do you think he can do it today?
Ralph, he has looked strong since he unloaded here on Friday afternoon and went out for that first night qualifying session. He has an opportunity not only to gather up that NHRA and that Winston money, but if you take into consideration the bonuses from Castrol and the other sponsors on that car, John Force could walk out of here this weekend with close to $500,000.
Absolutely unbelievable. If you follow NHRA drag racing, that is a huge chunk of change. And he can even win his unprecedented 6th Funny Car Championship here today at the U.S. Nationals. Well, how has this 5-time Winston champ done it all season? Here's how it went from Pomona to here.
At the start of the season, Al Hoffman had the best plan in the funny car range. His vision was to beat John Force into submission, taking his Winston crown from him in the process. And in Pomona, it looked like the plan was going to work. Hoffman beat the champ in the finals, and he did it convincingly. But in Phoenix, the plan fell apart as a first-round loss for Al and Force's win over Chuck Etchell prepared the Fuel Coupe class for the master plan. Force was going to dominate again. Hoffman was on his way to resurrecting the dream by qualifying first at Gainesville, but he burned the car to the ground on that very run. The team rebuilt the car, but didn't make it past round 2. Force again won over Etchell, who is beginning to look like a contender. Force then went on to win in Houston, again over determined Al Hoffman. And he took an unexpected runner-up finish to teammate Tony Pedregons in Atlanta. The win stopped rumors of Pedregons diving for the boss. Force went on to take the next 2 races, Virginia and Englishtown. That pesky Chuck Etchell proved he's legit by winning in Columbus over the In-N-Out Burger car of Mark Oswald. And then the dreaded streak continued. Memphis, Force. Topeka, Force. Denver, Force. And then a funny thing happened on the way to John's next win in Sonoma. He got beat by another Pedregon, Tony's brother, Cruz. Yeah, you remember him, the McDonald's guy who's playing his most insignificant role ever in funny car competition this season. And the last 2 races coming into Indy, you guessed it, nothing but brute force. It's going to be a long season for the rest of the funny car guys.
Now, the first one to talk about has to be Tony Pedregons. He went up against Tom Hoover. And Casey, right off the bat, we knew the Castrol team was serious and ready to play today.
Well, we knew today that they wanted Tony Pedregons to go some rounds because John Force needs all the help he can from Tony, as we talked about, to go for that championship. And what a run this was. Big ET, big speed.
Tony Pedregons trailers Hoover and would move on to the next round with a 5:01 at 3:06. Now, Al Hoffman and Jimbo more intense here at Indianapolis. John Force looking at that 6th Winston Funny Car Championship. First thing he's got to do is get past Chuck Etchell, which is never easy.
And he knows that Tim Richards can build some serious horsepower in this race car, so they're definitely not going to back up here, and he didn't back up. Another great 5-0 run from John Force.
You saw him drive away. Etchell's unfortunately did as well. The Castrol GTX machine makes its way into the semis. What a story.
A little better speed this time from John Force. First round only 294, this time 304.
Consistent on the ET zone. Now, with Jimbo has not been able to get him past the second round, they went up against Tony Pedregons, and we know that's a strong car.
It's definitely a strong car. Jimbo knows this. Jimbo's going to give it everything he has right here. Look at this car just take off. Beautiful run.
Jimbo, tell them all to shut up and go away, my friend. You're getting it done here today.
5:05, another 300-mile-per-hour run for Al Hoffman.
Al Hoffman marches on.
Hey, guys, the closest I've been able to come is door hinge, and I haven't been able to work it into the same sentence. I want to ask Austin Coyle a question. Austin, you guys are in the semifinals. If you win this thing, it could be the Winston Championship here. Any extra pressure on you guys?
Well, you know, the championship's a year-long chase. This round would make it official, but it's going to be official sooner or later with the lead we got. What we really want to do is try and win this round, go on to the final, and get all that bonus money for winning the doubleheader.
All that bucks, and we're going to find out if they're going to the finals. We're going to start these babies, boys.
Austin Coyle, Bernie Federally. You know, I think one of the things as we watch Cruz Pedregons' crew get ready to start, we were talking about this earlier. In NASCAR racing, all they're doing is spending a lot of time buying more cars, getting more teams together. in NHRA drag racing, everybody's going for more crew chiefs. The more crew chiefs you have, the bigger the brain trust, the better the car performs. Yes, John Force does have another car in Tony Pedregons, but he got John Medlin, which throws in with Bernie Federley and Austin Coyle. Look at the McDonald's crew. You got Lee Beard over there. You got Dave Settles over there. It's incredible, the brain trust.
You have a very difference of opinion when you have that many crew chiefs. You have one crew chief that's very aggressive. You have one crew chief that's very conservative. You get those people together and you get the consistency that John Force has had this year. It's not all about money. It's not all about parts. It's about making smart decisions with what you have available at the time. And John Force has the guys that have been able to make those decisions for him all year long in any kind of track condition, in any kind of weather.
And I think you hit on one of the keys there. You said every kind of track condition, every kind of weather. I still think, even though he's backed off it a little bit, I still think Force match races as much as anybody, and I still think that is a big part of it. What do you think, Steve?
Well, you know, let me give you another side to the two-car team. Tony Pedregon, Force's other car, smoked the tires the previous round. He was out, but they learned from that. That's the point of the two-car team. They know they can't run as much clutch, can't put as much power to the racetrack early as Tony did. Valuable information, invaluable, really.
Bob, at the far end or the near end of the racetrack down there, what do you think of both of those cars? They're looking pretty good. The brain trust taking one more look at them.
Yeah, they don't get any better than this round. I asked Austin Coyle, I said, if you guys win, double up, you get lots of money. Is the money a motivating factor? Or you guys just want to prove you got the baddest hot rod around? He thought for a minute and said, the money makes us move. It makes us worry a lot more.
John Force and Cruz Pedregon.
Austin Coyle mentioning all of that bonus money early on. Do you think maybe he gets a commission for that bonus money around?
Well, you can be sure of that. You can be sure that he's going to have no problem buying a whole bunch of those toothpicks he loves to chew on so much. So Larry Frazier will put Cruiser in the line, and look at Coyle really taking his time and putting John right where he wants him. Now it's up to the two drivers and two of the best in NHRA Winston Funny Car Racing, John Force and Cruz Pedregon.
John Force gets a reaction time advantage.
Oh, and look at the horsepower at the far end. John Force is one step closer to a $50,000 bonus, as well as a whole bunch of other money, a 5-1-301.
And John won that race on a hole shot. Cruz Pedregon runs 5:06. John just sealed his own destiny this year, the new NHRA Winston Championship. He did it on a hole shot.
John Force had to make it to the finals. He is now the unprecedented six-time NHRA Winston Funny Car Champion, and this is how he did it.
Ralph, you will never see a more beautiful funny car run from both cars. Both of the cars nice and straight, header flames nice and high, beautiful dry runs for both cars. Again, John Force comes through in the clutch like he has done so many, many times.
The Winston champions, all of them, John Medlin and Tony Pedregon's crew, joining with the rest of their teammates. The Castrol GTX driver is a Winston champion again, Steve.
And John, you have clinched your sixth championship with a hole shot victory over the evil red machine.
You know, he outran me?
Yeah, he did.
Well, I'll tell you something. This ain't about money no more, because I don't get none, but what this is all about is an old truck driver here that ain't giving up. We ain't too old. The whole world ain't old. I ain't old, but I got another round to go, then I'm getting drunk.
And here's something that'll help that out. Some champagne, a mini celebration. Deb Britson, come on in here. Jennifer Schrum, the entire Winston drag racing team. An early celebration for John Force. All right. Congratulations again, bud.
Thank you. Can I do this for the final?
That's all. He spit it out. It's okay, folks. He spit it out. He's a teetotaler anyway.
That's right.
Okay, gang.
Thank you.
That's it. We know all of our pro finalists. We'll be back to Indianapolis Raceway Park for more U.S. Nationals action. All the finals live for you. Stay with us, gang.
Costly.
When you're sitting in the car and you're just strapped in as they get set to light the cars now, do you have a chance to think of anything in particular or just everything that's going on around you?
Well, now at this point, as soon as that motor fires, you're thinking this is just another drag race. Calm down, do everything like we've done it for the rest of our drag racing career, and go out there and win this race. Let's forget that this is the U.S. Nationals.
So Al Hoffman now gets set to warm up the big tires on that Western Auto Parts America Haviland Pontiac. And a classic burnout as well from the Castrol car of John Force, who has already had a handful of titles bestowed upon him today or this weekend, being named the Big Butt Shootout winner and the Winston champion for Funny Car this year on the NHRA Tour. So, heck, let's give him something else. We've decided we're going to name him the Mopar High Performer of the weekend. His great job of his and the crews of coming out here and claiming all those titles here this weekend. If they can get one more by beating Al Hoffman, they truly will be a Mopar High Performer. So John Force, our Mopar High Performer here at the U.S. Nationals. Remember, there is an extra $15,000 on the line. Al Hoffman just one win this year, and that came at the very beginning of the season at Pomona. And if Jimbo Ermolovich wants to silence the critics, beating that guy is the best way to do it.
It surely is. And, you know, they've worked really hard on this car between rounds. They've thrashed on this car. It would be interesting to see if they were still working on this car when it came to the staging lines. Bob, can you give us a little info on that?
No, they seem to be pretty well prepared. I talked to Al Hoffman, and he's always extremely confident here. Remember, I was the only guy to go out on the limb yesterday and light their chances in the shootout. Hey, maybe he can beat himself and me here today.
Well, we said it before, and there is nothing Al Hoffman would rather do if he can't win the championship this year than to end Force's shot at the big money here today. Let's see if he can do it. He deep stays on Force, and he almost takes it all the way over, and Force is a U.S. Nationals champion and a winner of the bonus. Boy, Hoffman went after him. He was quicker out of the box, but the car just too much.
That was a little off pace, 5:13 for John Force, but it doesn't matter. It was good enough to win the U.S. Nationals. What an exciting run this is. Let's take another look at it. Of course, Hoffman having those problems in the round before. They had to thrash to put the car back together, and there you see a problem Hoffman's had this year. The car goes absolutely airborne, and he has to lift. John Force cruises to the win here.
He stayed in it as absolutely long as he could. Force a 513, 301 miles an hour. There's the entire crew, Austin Coyle and the gang. And Steve, there is going to be one big check with John Force's name on it.
And there's going to be one big party. You can't accomplish any more in one weekend than you have.
I'm drinking me some Budweiser tonight for NHRA and Winston and Castrol, Pontiac, Mac Tool. That was a drag race. I don't know what happened. Looked like his front end stood up out there about 300 feet.
It did.
That boy went deep. He went after old Forsey. This old fat truck driver, tough. Can I tell you, hey, he's a great racer, and I love him. But he went in, top lights went out and everything. I said, oh, we're going to do this. We're going to dance again, huh?
Off pace a little bit. It doesn't matter. You won it.
Off pace, what a run this time.
Who cares? I should have brought it
have
up.
to talk to Cole about that. Pays way too much money, this boy. Hey, we're proud. We're proud to be here, and for all the things this weekend. Still to the families, we love you. What can I say? You know what I mean? We're all in it with you, and yeah, we're going to have us a Budweiser right now.
John loves just about everybody. Stay with us, folks. We'll be back to wrap up our 3-hour marathon coverage of the NHRA U.S. Nationals.
Smokin' Joe's Funny Car will go up against the Funny Car, John Force. All sorts of new parts as well inside of that Smokin' Joe's car. And he's going to need all of them to put away the most dominant car in Funny Car this decade. Force has just done it all. Told you earlier, he's only lost them 10 times in the first round of the entire decade. It's just amazing. When you've done all of that, John, what's the incentive to progress?
Castrol's put $250,000 up for me if I can win, you know, as many titles as Earnhardt. They've also put up for my 75th win, I have to pass Glidden, who won 75 or 6. There's $150,000 there. So everybody thinks because we won, we're going to slow down. Right now, we're getting ready to try new technology, and we're going to keep thumping on the boys as long as we can, because trust me, they'll get tired of it, and they'll be thumping back.
And John has secured his deal with Castrol through the year 2000. He just found that out this weekend. Contracts being FedEx back and forth. Force is now signed, sealed, and delivered Castrol money. Not good if you're Whit Bazemore and the rest of the Funny Car contingent. John Force, maybe a little R&D work here this weekend as he gets set to go after his 7th championship next year. The 6th title already in the bag.
going to get through the Smokin' Joe's car first. Problems for the Smokin' Joe's car. He tries to pedal it, but it ain't enough. The domination continues. A 515, 301 miles an hour. The 300-inch wheelbase cars couldn't get there. Force can. Caminito, the Blue Thunder. That's the way you like to come back out of break with 6,000 horsepower coming right at you. Well, John Force ripped off a 300-mile-an-hour pass. Steve, do you think Tony Pedregon can do it as well?
Yeah, I think he probably can. He won't need to, however, because Jerry Caminito is a match racer. He's a round money racer. He came here for some cash flow. He got that by qualifying. He's not going to risk blowing up any of his very hard-to-replace, expensive-to-replace parts. If Pedregon makes a mistake, hey, Jerry will take it. But Jerry, quite frankly, doesn't expect to win here. Not that he won't be trying, but doesn't expect to.
That's a good point. The thing to remember, of course, that one thing all match racers have is a lot of experience on racetracks that are tough to get down. And maybe on a racetrack like this one here today, where we've seen a lot of smoking of the tires and having trouble negotiating this quarter mile here at Maple Grove, that maybe Jerry might just have a really good setup for a place like this. So, of course, John Medlin, Bob, has heard all the things from Bernie Federley and Austin Coyle in between Force and now their run. Were they busy making adjustments on the car?
This will be a classic case of where this two-car team's going to pay off. A lot of the cars in the lane where Tony is have really been balling the tires up and shaking it badly in low gear. Two cars will give this Castrol team a decided advantage. They should learn something from this win by Tony.
The R&D continues for the Castrol team as they march their way through to more wins on the NHRA Tour. Here we go. Oh, Tony smokes him, and he pedals it like a pro. Tony Pedregon was a sitting duck waiting for Jerry Caminito to sneak a win, but he pedals his way to a 557, 230 miles an hour. Looks like the R&D on Tony's drive is going pretty good, too.
Meet one of funny car racing's most colorful and feared drivers in the Diamond P video. John Force, still the one. Relive his rise to 5 championship titles.
Championship's what it's all about. It's why we came.
How he dominated the competition.
They tell me the nightmare's over, but goodies, it ain't.
And how he walked away from some of racing's most terrifying incidents.
When you're on fire, you're ready to fight. You're ready to stand up and say, hey!
See why John Force is still the one to beat. Call 1-800-651-3366 or write to the address on your screen.
Got a lot of work and funny car stories you want, funny car stories we got. Now, the big funny car story is John Force. Yeah, he's already clinched his 6th Winston Championship, but there's still a lot of racing. Can anybody beat him?
Well, good old pressure. Jump on him early. Don't let him get up because the pressure does rattle people.
I'll tell you, I think you got to be lucky. So we got a rabbit's foot and a 4-leaf clover strapped to the dash. I got him in my pocket. We got him everywhere. All the crews got it, so that's what we're going to try.
Well, he was consistent in Indy, but he was consistently slow. I mean, everybody actually outran him. He just outlucked everybody. You know, I mean, Tony or Cruz Pedregon ran better than he did. I ran better than he did. And, you know, he was just in the right place at the right time, and that's what it takes to win some of these things.
Good job on Witt's Ducati, but what could they do with this Smokin' Joe's car? Well, he would have to go up against John Force, the #1 qualifier, in round number 1. Smokin' Joe's car lives up to its name, smokes him off the line. Force blasts on through. The first 300-mile-an-hour pass of the day. Not even a top fuel car could go 300 in round 1. Big Jim Dunn turns the wrenches on this Moon Eyes machine, and they would go up against one of the Castrol cars. This is John Force. Let history speak for itself. Kenji puts away Force.
Congratulations over at Kenji, and Kenji went into kind of a weird little dance. I think underneath that yellow moon helmet is one happy guy from Tokyo, Japan. Finally.
Well,
Hey, I'm single happy man now. I beat the John Force. And hey, I like this track. Track is good. I mean, I believe track is good. I tell you what, hey, thank you, Jim Dan, the crew. I mean, Diane and Moon Eyes, Brew Panic. We did a good job. That's all.
Lean ladder. So the final four, Tony Pedregon against Kenji Okazaki. And the luck against the Castrol cars just ran out for Kenji. But Tony posts a 302-mile-an-hour pass. Everything learned off of Force's car, now working on Tony P.
Jeff Arend is going to have his work cut out for him in the final. Most of his crew people are schoolmates in the Paul Smith Drag Racing School. Over here, you got John Medlin working on this car. You got Austin Coyle's been over here. Bernie Federley has been going over here. Believe me, there's no volunteers and no students anywhere on this crew. And Tony Pedregon, this has got to give you just a ton of confidence.
Yeah, it really does, but we're not going to change our strategy. Our game plan is to just go out there, and we really feel that the track can hold a better number than we ran in the semifinals, so we expect a good race. We're going to go after them.
Good luck to you.
Thanks.
Little different story over there in the Jeff Arend pits, right, Bob Fry?
The final pair of cars are set to go. It is our funny car final. John Force. This year, he's used to being strapped in the car at this time of the day. He's looking things over with Jeff Arend, Paul Smith. The school car going against the R&D car. Tony Pedregon set to heat up those big rear tires. Steve, we've already seen that you cannot take Jeff Arend lightly. Paul Smith is pretty sneaky when it comes to tuning this race car.
There's few craftier than Paul Smith because he's never had much to work with, but now he's got a driver he can work with. But understand, Paul doesn't pay Jeff Arend. It's quite the reverse. Jeff Arend pays a pretty good stipend to drive the car. So to win here, he keeps the prize money. $30,000 would go a long way to keeping him bolted into a championship funny car.
Absolutely. He'll be able to buy a few more e-tickets for the ride in Paul Smith's funny car. I'm sure it is an e-ticket ride. There's a look at Tony Pedregon and the kind of year he's had. 28 round wins. The event wins just one, Bob, and maybe a good possibility of getting one here today.
Ralph, this race has had a history of upsets in funny cars. Della Woods went to the semis in '86. Brad Tuttle had a wild ride here in '87. Kenny Bernstein burned the Budweiser King to the ground a couple of years ago. And what a great page in the history books of Maple Grove it would be if Jeff Arend could win this race.
Well, they've made some final adjustments to the car. The track conditions, Bob, I would think are probably the best we've seen all day, correct? 68 degrees is the temperature right now, so the air is just perfect out there. Let's see. Tony Pedregon, Jeff Arend, the final run of the weekend. Arend is out first, and he did it. Jeff Arend puts away both of the Castrol cars. Going down. Jeff Arend puts away Tony Pedregon. A 518, 291 miles an hour. Total pandemonium at the starting line, Bob.
Oh, man. Guys, Paul.
We'll take two breaths to see if we can get through the rest of round one highlights. That's Al Hoffman in the far lane going up against Tony Pedregon. Now, Hoffman had hurt his shoulder earlier in the weekend. In fact, after this, Hoffman went to the hospital to get his shoulder checked out. Tony just welded him at the lights, wins it with a 509 with a 9 at 300 miles an hour. They get real close at the far end. Tony even picked up the Slick 50 money for winning on the whole shot. 301 miles an hour. John Force, Gary Bolger. Round two matchup. Bolger put away Densham. Force put away Platt. Do I need to tell you anything else? It's Force. What else would he do? He'd win, and win big. 494, 306 to a losing 509, 292. So, and in those three battles, Cruz leads it 2-1. The last time they had met was at the Western Auto Nationals right here at Topeka. Cruz was the winner. Tony was wound tight in between rounds waiting for this one. And a big release at the far end as he puts away his brother with a 492 at 306. Could it be an all Castrol final? Etchel's car has been shaking so hard, he's got 12 fillings he's got to get replaced after this race. That's violent. Force. Out of the lights, out of the box, and onto the finals. 495, 309. Force in search of his 12th national event win of the 96 season. Could he get it? It'll be coming up momentarily here live from Heartland Park, Topeka. And in order to do it, he's got to beat his own teammate, Tony Pedregons. It's all coming up from Topeka.
John Force's pit area. Steve Evans is over in Tony Pedregons, and my guy can beat his guy. My guy's going to take him out because my guy's John Force. And John, I was telling you, you got a chance to set the mark for the most wins in a single season, and you told me you're going for the cash.
Well, that's right. MB&A's put up a bunch of money out there, and Castrol backs that up, and so is Pontiac. So, besides, those are my guys. Never forget that.
Yeah, but you're my guy. Don't forget that. My guy can beat your guy, Steve.
Your guy doesn't have a chance. My guy, Tony Pedregons, you've got lane choice. You ran a 92 to his pokey 95 in the semis. We can whip him.
Yeah, and that's I think that kind of gives us an advantage going into the final. We whipped out that 92, so I know they're going after the record. They're going to try and lay one on us, but I feel pretty confident about the car's performance. So, and we've gotten whipped the last 4 times we've raced, so I've got some incentive to try and change things around.
Talking about my guy, Force is going to smoke the tires going for the record. Ralph, let's talk about Top Fuel.
We'll go and get right in the middle of it because we're about to send 12,000 horsepower screaming through your speakers. And if you got a home theater system, this is going to be just awesome. John Medlin turning the motor over for Tony Pedregons as you look at the round by round here at Funny Car.
Sure.
You know, Steve, the one thing I'm wondering about here is if Force is going for that 20 grand, they might have put a little too much into that car. He might even smoke the hides up a little bit.
A very astute observation. Let's listen to the burnouts first. Nobody does it like brute force. And I say that's astute, Ralph, because we're at an hour later in the day. I think this track would hold a 488, a 487. But the sun is still fairly high in the sky. It's beating pretty warmly down on my brow. And if John was telling us the truth, then I still like my guy, Tony Pedregons.
Well, your guy has run a 516, a 506, and a 492. Force has been in the 490s all day. That's might just be enough. What do you think, Bob?
Now, I don't think there's a better money racer in drag racing than John Force. I don't care what kind of tunes Steve Evans is singing down there. But when this thing's over, you're going to like John Force. It's going to be easy to dance to. Give it about a 95.
Remember now, these two drivers are going for two different things. Force going for the record. There's Force's car. Austin Coyle, Bernie Federer in the game, making final adjustments. Tony Pedregons on the other side is going for points. He wants to beat his brother Cruz in the number 2 slot in the Winston Points Championship. There's a look at Tony. This car will probably have some different paint scheme to it next year. It will be a Castrol product, but probably a different paint scheme. It'll be a little bit easier to tell them apart. There you see John Medlin putting Tony into the lights on the far side. Austin Coyle, how much have you put in to the Castrol car of John Force? If the brute force wins this, it is record win number 12. Nobody in the pro category has won 12 in 1 year. Until now, John Force has done it. Another 490. Third, not 490 of the day, 304 miles an hour. John Force has won his 12th NHRA national event victory of 1996. And we've got a little bit of a fire underneath Tony Pedregons' car. Tony will climb out of the top. We saw the roof hatch moving. I assume he is okay. Let's wait and see. He had problems right off the line. It left okay, and just about 60 feet out, it went away. Force just motored on as Tony is okay.
We got John down here.
Well, let's check in with you then, Steve.
John Forrest down here walks out to the edge of the racetrack, obviously concerned about his driver. It's good. He's just fine. He's just fine. A little problem at the starting line. He's A-OK. John, I was with you all the way. I knew you were going to win this thing.
Well, I don't know. We realized shallow stage. We tried to go after the number. He okay, though?
He's just fine. You got a 490, not quite the record, but you got the money in your 12th win.
Well, I don't matter as long as he's okay. You know, we come out for Castrol, Pontiac, Mac, all the guys try to do our deal. And where'd he get in trouble? Where was he in trouble?
He's right up the starting line, but he's okay. Again, congratulations, John.
Won a race. He got on fire and stole all the TV. Way to go, kid.
That's John Force. What else can you say when he completes an interview? There's Tony Pedregon. He'll be frustrated, but he should be holding on to second in the Winston Points Championship because of the points that he will have picked up by putting away his brother in the semis. So obviously, as you can see, the NHRA Safety Safari is out on the racetrack, going to work on making that left lane as good as they can, because we've got the top fuel final coming up shortly. Boy, did Tony make a mess of this one. The thing went away from him about the 60-foot mark. And at that point, Tony was still coasting all the way down the racetrack. We're staying with this here live from Heartland Park, Topeka, until we get the track cleaned up and we're ready to go racing. You will see the Top Fuel Final live from the Craftsman Nationals. Now, let's show you why the NHRA Safety Safari is out there working so diligently. The left lane, the Castrol car of Tony Pedregon, there you see it. It lets go just about the 60-foot mark. His teammate John Force is on to his 12th NHRA National event win. What an amazing season that man has had. And Tony, from this angle, the car on your right, you see the flames up underneath. And Tony's day is done, and we have got problems cleaning up the racetrack. What exactly was wrong with the car, Steve?
Well, let's ask the man himself. Tony, you don't blow it up if you're not giving it everything you've got. What did happen?
I hit the throttle. We're real disappointed that we couldn't give the fans a better race, but we really went up there to the starting line armed up, and don't know what happened. I mean, I hit the throttle, and it felt weak, and I didn't see John, but apparently it was something wrong with it right at the hit, and must have been parts breakage, because we didn't really change the tune that much.
You didn't feel it vibrate like it does when a connecting rod comes out or anything like that?
No, to tell you the truth, I didn't know it was on fire for a little while, and I didn't even know a rod came out till it started slipping on its own oil. And then when I saw the fire, then I hit the bottles. But, you know, we got the 2 cars to the final, and we're going to Dallas, try to pick things up a little bit.
You know, John was down here. He was almost a little bit jealous that you were on fire and he wasn't getting all this TV time. But I told you he was all right.
Yeah, we're just getting rid of all them old parts down there, blowing them all out.
Got new ones on the way.
Okay, great racing team, Ralph.
Not only do they have new parts, but they've got a new shot that should be just about ready to debut to the media and fans at Pomona. And the mothership, this thing that Force has been building, is just about ready to go too. They're going to check on that when they get to Dallas. Well, there's a look at the point standings. You can see how Tony now has a little bit bigger lead over his brother Cruz in the point standings. Hoffman and Etchels rounding out in the top 5. You know, there's one other thing about Tony Pedregon. He was really concerned about the look he had on his face after the race in Maple Grove. He thought, you know, Jeff Arena just won, and I didn't want people to think I was whining about the fact that I lost. What he was looking so distraught about is he's such an intense competitor. Tony Pedregon was afraid he was giving up too many points to his brother Cruz.
Racing domination. John Force clinched his 6th NHRA Winston Championship over a month ago at the U.S. Nationals in Indianapolis. But 2 other professional crowns are still up for grabs. And here is Cruz Pedregon in our final 4 of competition. This is, in fact, the battle of the Pedregons, and it's going on for 2nd place in the Winston Points Chase. Coming into this race, Tony held a slight lead over the Cruiser. But right now, it could be decided for the remainder of the season. If Tony could win this round, he would have a substantial lead over Cruz and make it almost impossible with only 1 race remaining on the schedule, the Winston Finals, in just 2 weeks, for Cruz Pedregon to catch his brother for 2nd place in the Winston Points Chase. Earlier, Steve visited with Cruz to look at this brotherly rivalry.
Cruz Pedregon desperately wants to lower that digit from a 3 to a 2. And that has been the points battle in Funny Car for the 2nd spot, even though John Force clinched the championship. It's been pretty wild between a pair of brothers named Pedregon, Tony and Cruz. And Cruz, I did the math on this thing. If you don't take your brother out in this next round, you don't have a prayer for the two.
For all the marbles, just like when we were kids, but hey, that's the way it should be out there. For all
It's $50,000.
It's a lot of money at stake, but it's bragging rights too at the Pedregon family, the picnics and everything. But hey, we're going to go for it. Car's running good, so we'll see what happens.
A sidebar to this story: Cruz holds the national speed record of what, 3:10. His brother has a leg up in the ET record. It could be all Pedregon across the board before the day's over. That'd be nice.
Sounds good to me.
Tony Pedregon in the far lane, the cruiser at the wheel of the McDonald's car in the near lane, but the Castrol machine has been running exceptionally strong. Qualified number 1 at a 490. Oh, what a classic drag race. 493 for Cruz. Pedregon at 308 miles an hour just outran Tony. He had a 5:01 and 3:07, but it was really a lot closer than it looked because Tony Pedregon got the advantage at the starting line. This was one of those races that the cruiser had to come from behind. He was back about 400ths of a second at the start, and right there at the finish line, one car length, the margin of victory to the final round of competition where he will meet the winner of this race. Will it be Dale Boldy, the substitute driver for Whit Bazemore? This is the Smokin' Joe's team car, but what a challenge he has, taking on the 6-time Winston champion John Force in his Castrol Pontiac. Austin Goyle and Bernie Federley, the brain trust that operate the mechanical side of things for Force, have had this car running to perfection. He is trying to win his 13th race of this season. He already holds the all-time record of 12 wins in a single season. Now, John Force trying to make it win number 61 here in Dallas, and it would come at the expense of the very talented Dale Boldy. It is not to be as one of the biggest upsets of the year takes place. Dale Boldy here in the semifinal round puts away Force, a 5:02 to a 5:05, and Boldy outruns him at the top end as well. Our instant replay shows you a great drag race. The advantage at the starting line went to Boldy by 200ths of a second. As they made their way down the racetrack, Force was trying to claw his way back into contention, but not to be. When you run 303 miles an hour with the Smokin' Joe's Mustang, you're a car length plus ahead of the 296 by Force.
People say I'm a show-off, that I got a big mouth. Sometimes I get out of control. That old Heap and me, we do all right. NHRA on TNN Motorsports. It doesn't get any closer. Key matchup of round 1. Cruz and Tony fighting for number 2 in the Winston Point Championship. And younger brother puts it to the old guy. Tony Pedregon near the wall. He never lifts, and he goes on to a 498 win, 294.
Car dropped a cylinder and it moved over to the right. I almost hit the wall, but you know, Cruz and them, we give them all the credit in the world. They're a good team to race against. They're going to be back next year, but this is great for myself and the crew chiefs that made it all happen, and Castrol, especially John Force.
Tony Pedregon had never been so emotional. That's John Howell from Castrol. He said it was the greatest moment in his sporting career. He's done everything, playing football at high school. He's done some boxing as the crew comes over. And he said beating his brother for second in the points, as he congratulates his crew chief, John Medlin, was the most emotional thing he'd ever done. Didn't even get down to 4 funny cars. Could Tony Pedregon meet the boss one more time? How about Kenji? He's got a whole contingent from Japan over here watching him. Oh, Kenji, a red light. And such a strong run. He would have had Tony welded. He welded himself, unfortunately. Oswald and Force. Gotta love the black car, John. Absolutely beautiful. Don't lose the flames. Force up against Oswald. Oswald said, my car's possessed and is close to Halloween. Not enough for the guy who was born on Halloween. Force gets the win, a 497. That's one scary looking car, Steve.
I agree. Save the flames, Force. This may not be the bouncy John you're used to seeing. He got a bad meatball last night at a reception, has a bit of food poisoning, but your driving certainly hasn't suffered from it.
Well, I really thank the Lord today. I got a good old hot rod. She's just making magic out there, Steve.
You are accomplishing this season everything you set out to do and more.
Well, the whole trick after Indy when we won and locked up the title was to get Tony in that #2 spot and get even for 92. And Cruz is a great racer, but Tony got him today, and we're just really excited that we did that.
And most importantly, the fans are going to see a side-by-side go-for-it race here.
Oh, yeah, if I can get to the start line, I'm a little down on power. The thing I'm really trying to do is keep this black flamed Action Collectible hot rod alive till I can get her home because she's going to the museum.
Go lay down, will you? Bob Fry is about 20 feet that way.
You see pattern developing. Looks like an instant replay over here. Rover from the force pit over here to Tony Pedregon. And Tony, I mean, after beating your brother, finishing #2 in the points and everything, is this final round anticlimactic?
Well, you know, we've seen this picture a few times in the final round, but I think we've got a real good shot at beating John this time. Our car ran a couple of 4s in the first 2 rounds, and it fell off in the semifinals. We know why, because we were a little bit on the edge, but we've just got a good shot at beating him. You know, it's been an emotional day, a big day for us, and we can't think of a better way to end this thing. We're really going to try and beat John.
I'm not sure if he's under contract or not. If he is, he'll probably beat John. If not, you never can tell. Ralph?
Oh, it should be a tremendous head-to-head fight between these two. They've matched up before 8 times in eliminations. Force leads at 7-1. Can Tony make it 7-2? He's done well with the #2 already, taking the 2nd spot in the points championship. There you see John Force getting set. The funny cars have just pulled into the staging lane, so it's going to be a minute or 2 before they're ready to go. John Force walks over to talk to Steve Gibbs, and there's Tony Pedregon getting strapped into his car. Well, we've already crowned some champions this weekend, and we want to take a chance now to salute the champions who have found their way to Glory Land. Glory Land. John Force has found his way to Glory Land 6 times as they get set to light that evil-looking black commemorative car with the flames on it. John's 6th championship. Great-looking car, Steve. Could be a winner.
It could be, but don't forget that green and white Castrol car also knows how to find the winner's circle. There's no points at stake here. All the money goes in the same bank account. We were in their pits. We saw everybody had equal parts, equal labor. I think Tony Pedregon, based on the couple of runs, or if you're going to throw out that one-way smoking tires, has got a very good chance of beating the boss, and the boss actually might even enjoy it.
Well, what a shame, as Tony...
This is a car that had a little bit of trouble. Tony Pedregon's car, they were struggling a little bit to get it ready to go racing, and looking like frustration on the face of the crew. Bob?
This car is not going to start, boys. They had problems back there in the pit area. They had to swap mags at the last minute. They're down here just now getting set to unstrap Tony Pedregon. It is going to be a single for that car here in the final. So they were over there in the pit area. That's one of the reasons why they were a little late getting these funny cars up into the staging lanes. Force was ready. Tony came in. As they were pulling into the lanes, they were trying to readjust the ignition and the timing. Just never did get it to fire over. So it's going to be a single here in the finals.
You see Kelly Pryor taking a look at it, and Tony climbing out of the car. Well, John Force is about to get, are you ready for this? His 13th national event win in 1 year. And this car, take a good look at it, because it is the last time you will see this body in competition. As you see a dejected Tony Pedregon, what a roller coaster ride he has had today, beating his brother Cruz, who Frank Pedregon told me earlier today that he used to hold Tony down so Cruz could beat up on him. Guess what? Tony beat up on his brother. He's not thinking about that right now. John Force, this car destined for a place in the showroom at Force's new race shop. The only time you'll see it race live in competition. Oh, and it hazed the tires. That was not what John Force wanted to do with that car. John is truly a showman, and he wanted to give this packed grandstand here in Pomona everything he could. And I know when he gets out to talk to Steve Evans at the far end, that'll be exactly what he will tell him. And I think the reason why, of course, he knew he was going to be going up against Tony. There you see Tony's reaction. Just a little bit more dejection as Force struggles to get it off the line. John came loaded for bear, didn't he, Bob?
Yeah, that was some way to end it. A couple of great finals coming in. You know, I just want to take a quick moment. There were a lot of big fires here in Southern California lately. There's two great drag racing fans, Scott French and William Jensen, big-time fans that were burned badly in those fires. They're in the Glendale Fire District. They're watching on TNN. We don't normally take moments to say hi to people, but we hope they get better soon, and they did a great job here, and we appreciate all of their efforts. Some finals here today, guys. Steve?
Underneath that helmet, I think John Force shares Tony's disappointment. That's not how you wanted this act to come out.
Nope. That was ruined my day, Steve. We wanted to come in here and run. We knew Tony back in the pits had problems. They tried to start the car 3 times. They had to change motors. They lost the motor on the last run when they smoked the tires like I just did. And we knew it. And, you know, we're trying to make TV. We pushed it. It's not good. Don't matter to me. I want to race the kid, and I'm just aggravated as hell.
It'll come, John. It'll come. Congratulations on a record-setting season.
If John Force could take that car back up to the starting line and do it all over again right now for the fans, he would. As you look at the Winston Funny Car point standings after 19 events, John has got 6 championships. Tony comes home in second. It's been a great season.